Chapter 800. Xia Xiaohe, who came at the right time, was soon ruthlessly attacked. The immortal technique of a peak Mahayana stage cultivator smashed over like a storm, forcing her to dodge left and right, which made her look very embarrassed. Hey guys, don't be in such a hurry. We have no enmity with each other, so we should be peaceful and friendly. Who wants to be peaceful and friendly with you? Qin Guangmu's eyes were as red as blood, and his hands were constantly changing gestures to adjust the attribute of immortal spirit. Like a tide, powerful immortal technique poured out, turning the world upside down. Such a fierce offensive naturally did not come without a price. Although Qin Guangmu had a long experience, his cultivation base was not the top among the group of Dixian. Although he also had the cultivation base of Mahayana stage, there was still a long way to go before the immortal spirit baptism. He could not use immortal spirit freely like Xianemo and Baizhe, and the use of immortal technique was greatly restricted. The price of Qin Guangmu breaking through the limit was to overdraft his jade mansion and burn his lifespan. The hatred between him and the fallen immortal was too deep. He joined Dixian very early, so it could be said that he had watched his companions sacrifice themselves along the way. The hatred between them had long been irreconcilable. Hey, don't think of me as a fallen immortal in the general sense. If I'm one of those murderous executioners, I would at least sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. How could I generously help you solve a big problem? Who knows what tricks you're playing? The food immortal coldly snorted. Xia Xiaohe smiled and said, Since you don't know what tricks I have, why did you attack me so boldly? Aren't you afraid of being ambushed by me? By the way, the little sister over there who is trying to contact the support, you'd better think about it clearly. If you contact the people of the Wanxian League now, what will happen? Do you really want to see your companions being sacrificed by a group of lowly ants? With that, Xia Xiaohe pointed to Baizhe and Xianemo. You still have the face to mention them. If it weren't for you, how could they be like this? Then don't you want to know why they would put aside their blood feud with the fallen immortal and join my side? At this point, Xia Xiaohe suddenly stopped and let Qin Guangmu's golden light penetrate her chest. She spat out half a mouthful of blood and said in a low voice, Qin Guangmu, have you vented your anger a little? The anger in Qin Guangmu's heart had yet to subside, but looking at Xia Xiaohe's appearance, he couldn't continue to attack. Perhaps Sun Buping's evaluation of him in the past was correct. He was cold on the outside but warm on the inside. On the surface he was stern, but in his bones he was so gentle that it made people sigh. He was not suitable to fight on the battlefield. He couldn't even bear to kill his mortal enemy. He was really, pooh. Qin Guangmu's heart was agitated, and he also spat out a mouthful of blood. As he spat out this mouthful of blood, the redness in his eyes faded. The rest of the people looked at each other and stopped attacking. In fact, most of these people were indecisive and lacked the nimbleness of a swift and decisive blade. Otherwise, Xianemo wouldn't have been able to escape with Baizhe for so long. The truly ferocious and decisive Dixian did not follow. Seeing that the situation had stabilized, Xia Xiaohe coughed twice and said in a low voice, I'm very sorry for what happened in the past. Humph, there's no need to say this kind of hypocritical words. What do you want to do? Xia Xiaohe shook her head and said, I'm very serious. I was born in the immortal world, so I actually don't know much about 9 regions. I only know that this is one of the countless lower realms, and the immortal world can kill and seize it. However, now that I've come to 9 regions, my idea has changed a lot. Although the power of 9 regions is not as good as that of the immortal world, it is the foundation of the immortal world. It has a unique charm that the immortal world does not have. I like it here very much, so I don't want to see 9 regions and the immortal world continue to fight like this. I can make an oath that there's no falsehood in this mood. If you don't believe me, you can ask them. Thus, Luo Shuai and the others immediately turned their attention to Baizhe and Xianemo. Baizhe smiled and said, Yes, in a sense she's right. Compared with the other fallen immortals, she does have a bit more favorable impression of 9 regions, but, however, before he could finish his words, Baizhe felt a strong dizziness and weakness, which made him unable to go on. Previously, when he was tied to the thorn pillar and bled like a sea, even Dixian couldn't support it. Xianemo, on the other hand, was focused on taking care of Baizhe and had no intention to explain other things. When Luo Shuai and the others heard this, their minds suddenly changed. Well, even if you're different from the other fallen immortals, so what? Can you resolve the blood feud between the 2 sides? Or can you stop the crisis of the fallen immortals? Xia Xiaohe shook her head and said, I can't do any of these. At most, I can only guarantee that there are hundreds of thousands of survivors in 9 regions that will not be wiped out. Hundreds of thousands? Do you know how many people there are in 9 regions? Are you kidding me? Are you deliberately making fun of us? When everyone finished questioning, Xia Xiaohe said, what I can do is indeed very, very limited, but it's much better than nothing at all. It's irrational to be an enemy of the immortal world. You can't imagine what kind of power the immortal world has. Right now, it can survive only because the passage between the two worlds has not been opened. But now that the passage is opened, the gatekeeper alone will not be able to hold on for long. Once the army of the immortal world comes, there's no need to say more about the fate of 9 regions. At that time, these hundreds of thousands of survivors are the tinder, the hope, just like how you buried your hope in the group of immortal tombs and let go of everything else. So why can't you do it again now? With that, Xia Xiaohe smiled at them and said, I know that this kind of thing is of great importance, and you can't make a decision immediately. So I think you might as well think about it first and give me a reply in a few days. After Xia Xiaohe left, Luo Shui and the others felt a little confused. What should we do next? They looked at each other and had no idea. Among them, immortal Luo Shui was the most intelligent and had the most ideas. However, she rarely acted as a decision-maker, so she couldn't make a decision on such a big matter. The food immortal suddenly said, I say, instead of thinking so far ahead, it's better to think about it first. Supreme Ling Dao was killed by that person, how do we explain it to the Wanxian League? Everyone suddenly understood. This was indeed a big problem. The death of Supreme Ling Dao could be said to be self-inflicted, at least it had nothing to do with them. However, how could they explain this to the people of the Wanxian League? At that time they would not be able to deal with a single question. That Xia Xiaohe only killed Supreme Ling Dao, but she was unscathed to them? How could they explain this? Should they tell the people of the Wanxian League that Xia Xiaohe wanted to instigate them, so she showed mercy and didn't resist? Then the next development was obvious. These instigated targets would never see the sun of 9 regions again. They would certainly be imprisoned in the death row for life. With the example of Supreme Ling Dao, Luo Shui and the others did not dare to think that the people of the Wanxian League were too kind. When they thought of this problem, they were full of complaints. The union of 10,000 immortals is really disgusting. Although that kid Wang Lu is not bad, right now he can't manage the union of 10,000 immortals. Thus, demons and monsters come forth in large numbers, which is really unbearable. Yes, so it's not unreasonable that Bai Zhe didn't agree to hand over the inheritance to them. Except for a few elites, most of the younger generation cultivators are just a group of dregs. So, maybe Xia Xiaohe's suggestion can be considered? Hey, don't talk nonsense. What are you afraid of? No one else can hear you here. While they were discussing, Shen Imo was still taking care of Bai Zhe. At this time he suddenly found that Bai Zhe moved his fingers as if he wanted to say something, but because he was too weak to do so. Shen Imo quickly injected his immortal spirit into Bai Zhe to let him breathe a sigh of relief. But after Bai Zhe recovered, he said something that shocked Shen Imo, I think it's time for me to die. What nonsense are you talking about? Luo Shui and the others were deceived by Xia Xiaohe's flowery words and are repeating our mistakes. Someone must stand up to wake them up, and no words are as powerful as the bloody reality. Xia Xiaohe killed Ling Dao and pushed Luo Shui and the others into a predicament, but my death can give an explanation to the Wanxian League and free Luo Shui and the others. In the end, as long as they insist that Xia Xiaohe forced me to die, it is tantamount to cutting off the possibility of peaceful coexistence between the two sides, and Xia Xiaohe's tricks will all fail. So, for the current situation, my death is the best for all sides. Shen Imo opened his mouth, but found that he had nothing to say, only silence. Bai Zhe sighed softly, and I'm really tired. Shen Imo was silent for a long time, and suddenly smiled at Bai Zhe. What you said is not enough. If you want to completely cut off the possibility of peaceful coexistence between the two sides, it's not enough to just kill you. After all, you're not very popular among the Earth Immortals. But if you add me, it'll be different. At this moment, Bai Zhe's eyes widened. Shen Imo, you? Shen Imo gently hugged Bai Zhe. I am also very tired. Don't forget that in the past 5 years, I have experienced the same torture as you. So, don't think about getting rid of me and relaxing alone. Bai Zhe was dumbfounded. After a long time, his expression gradually melted by Shen Mo's body temperature. Yes, we are all very tired, let's rest together. At the same time, as the number 1 person in Jiuzhou, Wang Lu began to feel a little overwhelmed. There were more and more problems that he needed to deal with. Xia Xiaohe had escaped several times, which had become a big problem. Feng Yin on the Stellar Peak had a sudden situation, which caused the operation of the entire 9 regions map to be blocked. Wang Wu's situation in the crack in the sky suddenly became difficult and precarious. The people of the Wanxian League became more and more outrageous, and the friction with Dixian was almost obvious. The Red Sea underwater workshop also encountered technical difficulties, which was difficult to break through with his own strength. Everything was so urgent and almost everything had to be done by him. The reputation of the number one person in Jojo was resounding, and the burden was also terrible. And Wang Lu was very clear that he could not deal with all these things at the same time, so he must prioritize and do it step by step. However, judging from the current situation, any matter that was ranked at the back was very likely to rapidly ferment and deteriorate, and eventually get out of hand. This was like a burning mess, and it was very difficult to sort out the clues, let alone solve the whole problem. It seems that it is necessary to change the way of thinking. Wang Lu flew in the sky and reflected on his previous series of actions. In a sense, he did not do anything wrong, and every step of the decision had sufficient reasons. But obviously the effect was not good. If I want to solve this dilemma, I must first find a breakthrough. Wang Lu took a long breath, launched the abnormally powerful computing ability of the giant divine weapon, and put all the information he knew into it for processing. After an unknown period of time, a light flashed in his mind. Yes, it's him. I wish all the friends who are taking the college entrance examination well. P.S. If you feel good after the exam, you can consider giving me a tip to let me know that your situation is okay. Chapter 801. Somewhere in 9 regions. The fox girl, bathed in blood, staggered into the cave. Her handsome face was covered with blood, which showed a kind of coquettish beauty. In the cave, Senior Immortal Poxa had been waiting for a long time. When he saw her bloody face, he could not help but be startled. The fox girl shrugged and said, "I'm sorry, although I tried very hard, I still haven't done it." Senior Immortal Poxa smiled and said, "You did a good job. Although you couldn't kill him on the spot, you seriously injured Feng Yin and successfully broke the great array of 9 regions. That's enough." The fox girl frowned and tried to clench her fist, but her right hand trembled. She said, "Actually, I had the opportunity to kill him just now. When I sneak attacked him, he was defenseless. As a human, his body was particularly fragile. I could actually capture his jade mansion and destroy his body and soul. But when I made my move, my right hand was somewhat disobedient, as if something was deliberately holding me back." When Senior Immortal Poxa heard this, his expression changed and he said, "Disobedient? Do you still have feelings for him in your heart?" The fox girl laughed at herself and said, "Still have feelings for him?" Senior Immortal's words really make me feel wronged and want to cry. After closing her eyes and being silent for a moment, the fox girl seriously said, "I was sealed by him for 100 years and fell to the mortal world like a puppet plaything. This kind of deep hatred, even if I personally kill the whole Spirit Sword Mountain, it would still be difficult to eliminate it. If there's anything that I haven't finished yet, it's the endless anger in my heart." With that, a few horizontal lines suddenly bloomed on the fox girl's cheeks, and a stream of fire spirit gushed out of her body and turned into several substantial tails behind her. The edge of the cave was instantly melted, showing a blazing light. Senior Immortal Poxa smiled and patted her on the shoulder. The fire spirit of the fox girl was extinguished in an instant. "Enough, I know. This time it's just the remnant soul of Feng Ling, not your subjective consciousness. But how long are you going to take to get rid of Feng Ling?" The fox girl said, "Very soon. The imprint left on me over the past 100 years can't be said to be not deep, but it's just an episode in my long life. For me, serving the immortal world is my lifelong mission. Immortal Venerable, may I ask what we should do next?" Senior Immortal Poxu touched his chin and said, "Xia Xiaohe didn't say? I think she should be acting freely. I want to catch someone now. Why don't you help me catch her?" "What kind of person is worthy of Senior Immortal's attention?" "Wang Wu." The fox girl was taken aback. "Isn't she already trapped in the passage and caught by Venerable Yen Luo?" Senior Immortal Poxa said, "How could it be that easy? That girl is a top-notch collection that I'm interested in. With Yen Luo and her subordinates, it's easy to trap her, but it's difficult to capture her alive. However, the great formation of 9 regions has been broken by you, so it is only a matter of time before she is caught by Yen Luo. I want you to work with me to catch her before Yen Luo does. It would be troublesome if such a perfect collection fell into the hands of others." The fox girl rolled her eyes, "But what if Venerable Yen Luo gets in the way?" Senior Immortal Poxa took a look at her, and his eyes showed a bone-chilling coldness. "Someone is in the way? What do you think we should do?" "I understand." The fox girl nodded quickly with a well-behaved look. "Okay, next." Senior Immortal Poxa stretched out his hand and gently grasped the space vein. He was about to tear the space and open a passage to the crack in the sky. At this moment there was a sound of footsteps outside the cave. Hearing the footsteps, Senior Immortal Paksu was shocked, and his hand that held the space vein could not help but loosen. Then he turned his head and stared at the person with great shock in his eyes. "It's you? I heard you were looking for me, so I came." Outside the cave, the woman in white was holding a green bamboo in her hand, like a noble lotus flower. Her face was reflected red by the fire, like a red lotus bathed in fire. "Wangwu?" Senior Immortal Paksu narrowed his eyes in disbelief and repeatedly examined the woman in front of him with his immortal eyes. However, no matter how many times he looked, it was still the Wangwu who haunted him. "Why are you here?" Wangwu scratched her head and said, "If I say that I miss you, will you accept it?" Senior Immortal Paksu laughed angrily and said, "Do you think I'm an idiot?" After a pause, Senior Immortal Paksu frowned and said, "However, it's rare for you to escape from Yenlua's killing array, but then come to me. Do you really miss me?" Wang Wu clapped her hands and said, "Yes, yes, if I didn't miss you, I would have gone back to Spirit Sword Mountain. Why bother to come to this wilderness?" "What do you miss me?" Senior Immortal Paksu seemed a little hesitant. Wang Wu blinked and said, "I want to be your collection." Senior Immortal Paksu almost coughed and said, "What did you say?" Wang Wu blinked her eyes seriously and made a sincere and lovely expression. "I mean, I'm moved by your art of collection and determined to be your collection." "Wait a minute, do you know my art of collection?" "Of course I know, it's to seek eternal way in torture and pain. The Supreme Zen can say that all living beings are suffering, and you want to collect the suffering of all living beings in your collection." The more Wang Wu said, the more Senior Immortal Paksu's eyes lit up. "I didn't expect you to comprehend it to this level." Wang Wu sighed and said, "It was also the last time I fought with Senior Immortal that I felt the unique charm of immortal spirit, which greatly inspired me and made me comprehend the truth of the world. After that, I thought, if I could collect the suffering of all living beings in my body, what a wonderful feeling it would be." When Senior Immortal Paksu heard this, he was overjoyed. However, the fox girl next to him coldly interrupted, "Your words sound a bit absurd. The instinct of living beings is to seek benefits and avoid harm, to stay away from pain, but your idea is completely contrary to the nature of living beings." Wang Wu said, "Immortal cultivation is originally against the heaven. What's the difference between a person who can't disobey his nature and a beast? Of course, a mongrel like you who has transformed into a beast probably won't be able to understand this. You're quite sharp-tongued. However, although there are many cultivators who go against the heaven and like to chase after pain, there are only a few who can be made into a collection." Wang Wu said, "Isn't that a given? There are many mediocre people in the world. Most of them are muddle-headed and not worth mentioning. But I am a peerless pervert who likes to chase after pain, likes to be whipped, cut by sharp objects, burned by wax oil and penetrated by lightning. Think about it, if I'm not so perverted, how could I create a method like non-phase method that is purely for taking a beating?" "Well said." Without waiting for the fox girl to refute, Senior Immortal Paksu clapped his hands and praised, "I really didn't misjudge you. To be able to say this, you're the perfect collection that I've been pursuing all my life. Well, don't waste any more time, come and accept my training and become the perfect collection." With that, Senior Immortal Paksu couldn't wait any longer. He gathered a huge amount of immortal spirit in his hand and walked toward Wang Wu. "Wait a minute." Wang Wu stretched out a finger in front of her chest and propped up a golden polygon, which blocked the footsteps of Senior Immortal Paksu. She said, "There's one more thing to do." Senior Immortal Paksu frowned and wanted to reach out to break the obstacle in front of him, but found that her sword defense was very strong. "Do you want to go back on your word?" "No, I'm just thinking that in order to make it a perfect collection, we have to make sure that everything that happens next is foolproof." "Immortal Venerable, are you really ready?" Paksu was stunned for a moment, and then said with a smile, "Are you doubting my craftsmanship?" "It's not doubting the craftsmanship of Senior Immortal, but doubting whether someone will allow Senior Immortal to get the perfect collection." "Someone? Who do you mean? Who dares to hinder me from getting you? Is it Wang Lu?" "Humph, I'm going to kill him." "Senior Immortal, don't worry." Wang Wu shook her head gently and said, "Wang Lu is certainly an obstacle, but his ability is limited after all. Moreover, he's already under a lot of pressure, how could he have the energy to hinder us? The person I'm talking about is Xia Xiaohe." "Xia Xiaohe? Why is she in the way?" "Because she still needs Senior Immortal to do things for her and be driven by her. Imagine what the Immortal Venerable would do if he had obtained this perfect collection of mine." Senior Immortal Paxa said, naturally, he would play with you carefully and experience every inch of the beauty of your body. Look, the matter of 9 regions has been forgotten by Senior Immortal. Of course, Xia Xiaohe will not allow Senior Immortal to stay out of it. She will try her best to take me away and then use me as bait to drive you to do this and that. I think she must have done this kind of thing more than once when she was in the immortal world. Senior Immortal Paxa's face sank and said, yes, she is indeed the best at using this kind of method. Senior Immortal has always been unruly and rarely showed such flaws before. For Xia Xiaohe, this is a rare commodity. Think about it, if the immortal sovereign's vital part was really grasped by her, would she let go? Senior Immortal Paxa's face became even uglier and said, no. Not only that, she will constantly use me to stimulate Senior Immortal, such as handing me over to other teachers and leaving their marks on me. Bastard. I will never allow you to be tarnished by others. Wang Wu shrugged her shoulders and said, then you have to constantly listen to her orders and do everything for her. She is the princess of the immortal world. I'm afraid even her father will support this kind of imperial scheme. Senior Immortal Paxa didn't say a word, but his constantly trembling body fully explained his mood. Of course, Xia Xiaohe is the princess of the immortal world. We can't kill her, but at least we can't let her trouble us, right? Senior Immortal Paxa asked, what are you going to do? Wang Wu said, it's very simple, make her a collection. Senior Immortal Paxa's eyes suddenly turned cold and he said, do you want to kill someone with a borrowed knife? Yes, but the person I want to kill is the enemy of Senior Immortal. Xia Xiaohe's death is good for both you and me. While Senior Immortal Paxa was still hesitating, Wang Wu said, now that the passage between the 2 worlds has been opened, and after I was defeated by Yen Luo, there is no qualified gatekeeper in 9 regions. Now Tetragon is leading his men to barely support it, but it's just a dying struggle. The army of the immortal world will soon break through the passage and arrive. At that time it will be too late to make a move. Just think about it, if Xia Xiaohe is also made into a collection, I'm afraid her collection value will not be lower than mine. Even if she can't be completely transformed and trained because of the face of the immortal king, even if it's just a little bit, it will be a milestone in the history of your collection. So, Senior Immortal, what are you waiting for now? Mfha. Senior Immortal Paxa laughed wildly and said, Wang Wu, your trick of killing someone with a borrowed knife is too obvious. Do you think that my brain has become an idiot just because I have a demon in my heart? Wang Wu shrugged her shoulders and then retracted the shield in front of her. Since the Celestial Sovereign doesn't believe me, then I don't have any better ideas. Please, Celestial Sovereign, immediately turn me into your best collection. I just don't know if this collection will really fall into the Celestial Sovereign's hands. Before her voice fell, Senior Immortal Paxa's eyes changed. He just received Xia Xiaohe's order. Come and meet me quickly. When Wang Wu saw the change in Senior Immortal Paxa's expression, she smiled and said, Xia Xiaohe is really fast, isn't she? In the end, Senior Immortal Paxa didn't make a move. Instead, he passed by Wang Wu's side, put one hand on her shoulder, and firmly bound her with an immortal spiritual lock. Fox, look after her. Then, Senior Immortal Paxa left through the space passage to meet Xia Xiaohe. The fox girl nodded silently, and then turned to look at Wang Wu with a playful expression. Who the hell are you? Wang Wu shrugged her shoulders and said, a perverted girl who has awakened her true nature. You should be able to see it. The real Wang Wu will not evaluate herself so maliciously. Your words and deeds remind me of a person. By the way, that person has a magical weapon that can change its appearance at will. If it is used for camouflage, I wonder if the effect would be good? Wang Wu said with a smile, oh? I didn't expect that you, this fox, still have a lot of memories. Do your memories make you feel that, in fact, all these years in 9 regions, you've been very happy? Although you're just a mortal, you can be free and you don't have to be wantonly ordered by those high and mighty immortals? Your joke is good. Do you really think that's a joke? The fox girl coldly snorted and ignored Wang Wu. I don't care about your identity, so don't bother me. Chapter 802. Fox, let's have a chat, shall we? Fox, your tails are a bit asymmetrical. Do you need me to fix them for you? Fox, I'm hungry. Let me eat. In the cave, Wang Wu kept teasing the 9-tailed fox with words. However, the other party didn't give any response at all. She just closed her eyes and meditated. Fox, there's no need to be so vigilant, right? We are essentially the same kind of people. We should communicate more, enhance friendship, and help each other. Wang Wu talked incessantly and finally the 9-tailed fox opened her eyes. Save it, I'm not interested in listening to your nonsense. I'm the same kind of person as you? What a joke. Wang Wu suddenly became excited and said, aren't we the same kind of people? Although I'm a prisoner of war, you're just a servant soldier in the immortal world. You were thrown from the immortal world to 9 regions by the neck, and no one cared whether you were dead or alive for more than 100 years. I don't think your status is higher than mine. On the contrary, during the time when you ran the inn at the foot of Spirit Sword Mountain, although you were immortal, who treated you as a servant and ordered you around. On the contrary, everyone in Spirit Sword Mountain regarded you as one of their own. Feng Yin, the dignified sect leader, has been slapped in the face by you many times, but he's willing to endure it. Do you think he's really a cheap wretch? He loves you as if you were his own daughter. Shut up. Do you think I'll believe it? I almost destroyed Lingjian School that year. I'm afraid he hates me to the bone. If he really hates you to the bone, can you live to this day? Even if 100 years ago the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall and Lingjian School had not reached the ultimate success realm and could not completely eliminate the nine-tailed fox, but in the following decades, the strength of Lingjian School continued to advance by leaps and bounds. Do you think Feng Yin really can't find a chance to destroy your body and soul? Not to mention anything else, when I inherited the giant divine weapon of Sun Booping, I had enough ability to destroy your soul, but Feng Yin never told me about your background. Alright, I'll take it as you're being magnanimous, but what does this have to do with me? In my opinion, this only means that you guys are really stupid and soft-hearted. You have no future at all. A future is earned, not something that falls from the sky. Right now, the immortal world is powerful, but 9 regions is not without the ability to resist. You think you can resist the immortal world? You have no idea how terrifying the power of the immortal world is. At most, there are only 100 true immortals. A world that is about to fall can't afford to raise too many immortals. That's why you want to invade 9 regions and plunder resources, right? The 9-tailed celestial fox laughed. Are you trying to trick me? You actually dare to play these little tricks in front of the 9-tailed celestial fox. You are quite bold. Wang Wu also smiled. Judging from your reaction, my guess was right. I have roughly calculated that 100 people is the current upper limit of the power of the immortal world. If there are more people, 9 regions is not worthy of your solemn treatment, even sending the princess. If there were too few people, not to mention other things, even the slave army might not be able to suppress them. So my guess is 100 people, and it seems that my guess is right. In that case, you should also be able to calculate that although our chance is slim, it's not impossible. Although the strength of 9 regions is weak, it is the ancestor of the immortal world. There have been countless great geniuses here. The Lingjian School alone is not as simple as outsiders think. You should have felt this when you made your move against that old man Feng Yin. At that moment, was it really your arm that didn't listen to you? So do me a favor. Hey, don't you think your turn is too stiff? That's why I say leave a line of life. Since there is still a line of life in 9 regions, why don't you invest a little bit on our side? Maybe there will be 1,000 times return in the future? In any case, you don't like that Xia Xiaohe, right? Let's kill Xia Xiaohe first and then we can talk about it slowly. What do you think? The 9-tailed celestial fox shook her tail and didn't speak. Since you don't object, then let me tell you what we should do next. When he saw Xia Xiaohe, Senior Immortal Pox's face was as gloomy as a dark cloud. The other party's summons clearly showed that she had bad intentions, so it was impossible for him to show any good attitude. Senior Immortal Poxa was never a person who was easy to talk to. In the state of the heart demon, he had indeed become a lot gentler. However, once it was confirmed that his interests were hindered, he could become more ruthless than normal. He had been to the endless immortal prison more than once or twice. He could not even give face to the immortal king, let alone a mere princess of the immortal world. Xia Xiaohe saw the gloomy face of Senior Immortal Poxu and asked coldly, "Did you see Wang Wu?" "Yes." Poxu asked impatiently, "And then?" "And then? You actually want to ask me and then? I want to ask you and then? You saw Wang Wu and then? Why didn't you kill her immediately?" Senior Immortal Poxu took a deep breath and then calmly said, "Because she is the most ideal collection that I said. And this time, she took the initiative to find me and frankly said that she was willing to accept my transformation and become the most perfect and delicate collection in the world." Xia Xiaohe was stunned for a long time and said, "She said that and you believe it?" Senior Immortal Poxa said, "Why not? Use your brain a little bit and think about it. Who would throw themselves into the trap to be your collection?" Senior Immortal Pox's eyes were burning and he refused to give in an inch. He said, "If she is the fated person in my life, Then she will understand my art of collection and will be willing to become my collection. You're really incorrigible. I don't need others to save me. Your Royal Highness, please don't intervene in this matter. Xia Xiaohe stared at Senior Immortal Paksu. After a long time, she suppressed her anger and said, Paksu, for the sake of our many years of friendship, I remind you that the identity of that Wang Wu is very suspicious. Now there is a Wang Wu and Yan Luo fighting in the passage. Think about it carefully. Who is the Wang Wu you met? Don't play with fire on impulse. I know whether it's suspicious or not. Senior Immortal Paksu said in a cold voice, I don't care how many Wang Wu there are in the passage. There is only one Wang Wu I want, and that is the one who takes the initiative to find me and can understand my art of collection. You're just deceiving yourself. People with different goals cannot make plans together. For the sake of our many years of friendship. Your Royal Highness, I'll take my leave first. Where are you going? Xia Xiaohe's figure moved and stopped in front of Paksu. Paksu didn't retreat even half a step and said, to finish the work that should have been done long ago. Wang Wu is still waiting for me, and I have been delayed by you for too long. Xia Xiaohe said angrily, at this time, you want to abandon the great cause of the immortal world and play with your woman? If you're not satisfied, go to the immortal king to complain about me. I don't care. Wait. Xia Xiaohe grabbed Paksu's wrist so that he couldn't launch his immortal technique. Paksu, I think you've been confused by that woman's honeyed words to the point that you're in a delirious state. Before her voice fell, Xia Xiaohe felt a burning pain in her palm. An immortal fire was ignited on Paksu's wrist. Your Royal Highness, please don't force me. Xia Xiaohe gritted her teeth and finally loosened her hand. Paksu, you will regret it. I never regret what I do. Paksu said and cupped his hands to Xia Xiaohe. Thank you for your help, princess. Get lost. Paksu smiled, took a step forward and was about to leave. However, at this moment, a space crack suddenly opened not far away, and two familiar figures came out of it. The one in the front had a foxy face and several long tails behind her. It was the nine-tailed fox who had just restored her original body. The woman behind the fox had an indifferent expression and was dressed in snow-white clothes. She was Wang Wu. After crossing the space passage, the fox saw Xia Xiaohe, so she happily said, Yo, Your Royal Highness, I've brought the person you want. Then her voice stopped abruptly. At this time, the fox girl had already seen Senior Immortal Paksu, who was half a step away, and then smiled awkwardly and guiltily. Oh, did I come too early? I didn't calculate the time well, I'm really sorry. Then, with a roll of her long tails, she disappeared without a trace. Paksu didn't care about the fox girl and didn't even look at Wang Wu. Instead, he looked at Xia Xiaohe with a cold face. Your Royal Highness, what do you want to do? Bribing the people around me and taking Wang Wu here when I was unprepared? Is this the purpose of you summoning me here? Xia Xiaohe's two willowy eyebrows had been entangled into a ball. Paksu, shut up and use your brain. In this situation you should be able to see that it's all led by someone. Yes, isn't everything under your control? Xia Xiaohe still calmed down and said, if I'm really in charge of all this, I will never let you find this flaw. Paksu, however, didn't buy it and said, if you can do everything without flaws, you won't let me see this scene. Seeing this scene, it just shows that your control of the situation is not perfect. Xia Xiaohe took a deep breath again and inwardly scolded this guy for being smart when he shouldn't be. However, the real cause of all this was undoubtedly Wang Wu. No, I'm afraid she was not the real Wang Wu. Although that woman was powerful, she was not known for this kind of calculation. In today's 9 regions, the only person who could have this calculation and execution ability at the same time was probably. Thinking of this, Xia Xiaohe suddenly turned her head and saw Wang Wu sticking out her tongue at her with a treacherous smile on her face. Sure enough, it's you. Xia Xiaohe glanced at Senior Immortal Paksu and knew that she had to make a decision now. And her decision was very simple. After a simple bell sound, a sword light shot out from between her eyebrows and went straight to Wang Wu. The moment the sword light shone, the world dimmed and endless pressure descended on 9 regions. Senior Immortal Paksu was the closest. When he saw the sword light, his mind was greatly shocked. Shenyuan sword? An innate treasure, one of the top 3 peerless divine weapons in the immortal world, was actually in the hands of Xia Xiaohe. No, it was not the main body of Shenyuan sword, but the projection given to her by the immortal King Xiaoyu. However, even if it was just a projection, it was still the projection of an innate treasure. No creature in the lower realm could resist the power of Shenyuan sword. After this sword strike, no matter how strong Wang Wu's non-phase sword defense was, she would die without a doubt. At this moment he saw the heavy body of Shenyuan sword, Xia Xiaohe's determined eyes, and at the same time Wang Wu's indifferent face. In an instant, countless thoughts turned in Senior Immortal Pox's mind. However, before he could sort out these thoughts, his body had already moved. He came to the front of Wang Wu at a lightning speed. The next moment, the sword light penetrated his body, and a simple and square bronze sword was inserted in his heart. However, in the end it stopped. His tyrannical strength, which was firmly in the top 3 among the senior immortals, allowed him to stop the projection of Shenyuan's sword in a hurry. However, after this sword strike, Senior Immortal Poxu was also like a dried-up oil lamp. Poxu? Xia Xiaohe looked at Senior Immortal Poxu in disbelief and said, "Are you crazy?" "No, of course I'm not crazy, so, come down with me, Xiaohe." Poxu's 7 orifices were overflowing with blood. He laughed wildly and pointed at Xia Xiaohe. At this time, his vitality was cut off, but he could still mobilize the surging immortal spirit power in his body, gather them together, and form a great immortal technique. Broken Immortal King. The immortal technique was silent and invisible, but there was a hole in Xia Xiaohe's chest that could never be healed. Her heart and her jade mansion were all turned into nothingness under the bombardment of the Broken Immortal King. Chapter 803. The fight between the two immortals was like the rise of a hare and the fall of a falcon. In the blink of an eye, Shenyuan's sword and Broken Immortal King, these great immortal techniques that were rarely seen in 9 regions in 10,000 years, were used one after another. The two of them were hit at the same time and suffered fatal injuries. It seemed that the outcome was already decided. Wang Wu, who watched the whole process from the side, was amazed. This plot. I really lost. No matter how she deduced it before, she could not deduce such a surprising development. The two immortals actually fought each other without saying a word, and they even tried to kill each other. Were the two of them childhood sweethearts or absolutely irreconcilable enemies? Even the most optimistic expectation did not think that it would be so easy to trigger a war between the two immortals. The previous arrangements that could cause the two of them to appear to be in harmony but actually at odds with each other was already an excellent result. According to the original arrangement, after following Senior Immortal Poxu to this place, which aroused Poxu's strong suspicion of Xia Xiaohe, she should immediately leave, pretend to be hidden by Xia Xiaohe, and then further alienate the relationship between the two. But now, it seemed that there was no need to be in such a hurry to leave, because the next change must be followed up as soon as possible. Wang Wu slightly lowered her shoulders, shifted her center of gravity and put on a fighting posture. The 9-tailed celestial fox stood quietly behind her, rolling her eyes. On the other side, Xia Xiaohe lowered her head and stared at the hole in her chest. Her expression was neither happy nor sad. After a long time, amidst Pox's occasional coughs, she softly asked, "Broken Immortal King?" As the name implied, the target of this move, Broken Immortal King, was completely aimed at the king of the immortal world. Its power was so powerful that it could break through the defense of the princess of the immortal world in a hurry. It indeed had the capital to threaten the immortal king. However, the Broken Immortal King had such a powerful destructive power that it had clearly destroyed Xia Xiaohe's vital points, but she still stood in the same place and could still speak as if she was not affected at all. Poxa coughed up a mouthful of blood and said with a smile, "Yes, I specially designed this move for Xiaoyu, but it's worth it to use it on you. It's really an eye-opener that I can't kill you like this, Your Royal Highness. In return I'll show my skill." While speaking, Poxa suddenly opened his mouth, and blood gushed out of his throat like a waterfall. The amount of blood was so huge that it seemed as if his whole person had been hollowed out. His body shrank at a very fast speed and soon became a mummy. At the same time, a strong death energy began to gush out of Pox's body. Senior Immortal Pox's flesh and blood began to fall off, and his internal organs began to corrode, revealing pale bones. After a while he became a tall and burly skeleton. The Shenyuan sword cut off the vitality, but Poxa had the means to turn the dead into life. He had forcefully extended his life. Xia Xiaohe was not surprised at all. With an immortal king as an imaginary enemy, if there was a broken immortal king, there would naturally be a way to deal with the Shenyuan sword. But why? Xia Xiaohe quietly watched Poxa complete the transformation from death and then asked, "This is your choice? For an inexplicable collectible, for an obvious fake?" Senior Immortal Poxa sneered and said, "Fake? Do you know what is true and what is false? Don't always use your standards to ask the world, Your Royal Highness. Your Xia family is always so self-righteous, which is really disgusting." As he spoke, a black tide that blotted out the sky swept towards Xia Xiaohe. The black tide was filled with terrifying and vicious curses. Compared with the black tide that used to ravage the Blue River region, it was as pure as water. Xia Xiaohe didn't say a word and let the black tide swallow her. After a long time in the black tide, her voice was clear and distinguishable, as if it was close to his ears. Do you really know who she is? I don't need to know who she is at all. I just need to know that she is the only confidant who can understand my art of collection. Understand your art? Yes, no matter what her purpose in approaching me is, no matter whether she really agrees with my idea or not, to be able to say those words at that time, I know that she really knows the ropes. At the same time, facing the inexplicable gaze of the nine-tailed fox, Wang Wu shrugged her shoulders and explained, as a top student, it's inevitable that I know a little bit of miscellaneous knowledge. However, it's just an academic discussion. Don't take me as a real pervert. On the other side, Xia Xiaohe ignored Pox's explanation. Then, for her, you would rather abandon the immortal world and me? The next moment, the black tide suddenly collapsed inward, and the endless darkness was gathered into a walnut-sized ball, which rotated in the palm of Xia Xiaohe's hand. Xia Xiaohe's face also became ferocious and strange. Poxu, you really let me down? Disappointed? It's not your turn to say that. It's me who should be disappointed. Whether you agree with Wang Wu or not, I have told you clearly before that she is my most cherished collection and will be the proudest work in my life. And what did you do? Have you ever considered my thoughts before you took out the Shenyuan sword? Have you ever discussed it with me, not even once? Your sword was resolute. Even after I was seriously injured, you refused to take back the Shenyuan sword and still wanted to kill Wang Wu. What do you think I am? A plaything that you can do whatever you want. You want me to do whatever you want me to do, but after that, you still have to put on a face that everything is for my own good. I don't need your hypocrisy. When Xia Xiaohe heard this, she sneered and said, So, you really have been holding a grudge for a long time, and this matter is just a fuse. Xiaoyao has always said that you are naturally rebellious, and it's indeed not wrong. I've been wrong to believe you all these years. Today, let me correct this mistake with my own hands. After that, the black ball in her palm was hit by her. The speed was as fast as lightning and it went straight through Pox's skull. However, Pox's ferocious laughter came faintly from a very far away place. Ha, I've been waiting for this day for a long time. I can't kill your father, but it's enough to kill you. You can withstand my broken immortal king. I'm afraid that old fart Xia gave you all the 36 puppet insects. And I'd like to see if you have the other 36 puppet insects. As he spoke, the wind and clouds surged, and the surrounding spiritual energy gathered at an astonishing speed. Even the law of the great path in this place was quickly attached to it. The first broken immortal king was done in a hurry, but the second time, it could be operated with all its strength. Its power was so strong that it made the world tremble. Xia Xiaohe, on the other hand, just silently raised the Shenyuan sword, placed the sword horizontally in front of her chest, and stared at the face reflected on the sword without saying a word. When Xia Xiaohe stagnated, Senior Immortal Poxa did his best to push the second broken immortal king to the peak. At this point, all the changes between heaven and earth disappeared, and the clouds that covered the sky and the sun dispersed. The spring sunshine was beautiful, the river was clear, and the sea was calm. Because all the energy was concentrated in the control of Senior Immortal Poxu, not a trace of it would leak out, so it would not cause any change in the environment. Your Royal Highness, farewell forever. The next moment, the broken immortal king attacked with all his strength. Xia Xiaohe sighed and said, Farewell forever, Poxu. Then, from top to bottom, the Shenyuan sword drew a bright straight line, which divided the sky and the earth into the left and right sides. Between heaven and earth, Senior Immortal Poxu showed a relieved expression. Sure enough, it's you, this old fart. Then, Senior Immortal Poxu disappeared quietly, and even the broken immortal king that had been released disappeared. Only the line drawn by the Shenyuan sword remained between heaven and earth for a long time, and then gradually disappeared. After this sword, Xia Xiaohe quietly closed her eyes for a moment, and then raised the Shenyuan sword again and pointed it at Wang Wu and the nine-tailed fox. Next, it's your turn. Wang Wu's heart turned cold, knowing that she would face a severe test next. After all, sitting on top of the mountain and watching the tigers fight could not solve all the problems. As a result of the war between the immortals, the possibility of both sides suffering losses was only the smallest. The greater possibility was to leave behind a seriously injured winner. And even if the winner was seriously injured, he still had a tyrannical strength that was difficult to contend with head-on. However, there was nothing to complain about this result. Poxu was dead and Xia Xiaohe was seriously injured. It could be said that most of the biggest crisis in 9 regions had been resolved. Next. The woman in white snorted softly, and her figure began to expand rapidly. In the blink of an eye, she turned into a burly giant with a height of more than 3,000 meters. The real culprit, Wang Lu, finally showed his true face. Come on, let me see the means of the princess of the immortal world. See my ass, why don't you run away? The voice of Senior Immortal Paksu suddenly exploded in Wang Lu's ears. The next moment, a space channel opened under the feet of the giant divine weapon and pulled it in. After the fall of the giant divine weapon, a thin silver line appeared in its original place. Xia Xiaohe's sword missed, so she regretfully looked at the place where the giant divine weapon disappeared. She shook her head, silently withdrew the Shenyuan sword, and then her whole body collapsed like debris. On the other side, Wang Lu, who fell from the space channel, found himself standing in the mountain where Senior Immortal Paksu had previously used as a stronghold. The shadow of a skeleton loomed in front of him. Senior Immortal Paksu? Regarding this fallen immortal, Wang Lu's feelings were really complicated. On the one hand, the two sides were hostile and could be said to be enemies of life and death. On the other hand, he really helped him solve a lot of troubles. In the end, it could even be said that he saved his life. Xia Xiaohe's last sword strike, Wang Lu was not sure that he could take it. Hey, sure enough, it's you. The shadow of the skeleton looked up and down at Wang Lu and said, I knew it wouldn't be that tasteless woman. Wang Lu was silent for a while and said, What do you want? With Wang Lu's eyesight, he could see that Paksu was in the final radiance of a setting sun at this time. He was able to survive under the Shenyuan sword and help him escape. He had already overdrawn himself too much, and his soul was not far from dissipating. Paksu smiled and said, I do have something to ask of you. Help me avenge Xia Xiaohe. Wang Lu frowned. Xia Xiaohe was clearly seriously injured by you, yet you want me to avenge her? That's not the real Xia Xiaohe. The Xia Xiaohe you see is just a clone of Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu's clone? The real Xia Xiaohe will not mention the Shenyuan sword to you when she knows that I want to protect you. Although she is Xiaoyu's daughter, she is not as inhuman as Xiaoyu. However, she probably died a long time ago. Xiaoyu's lifespan has long been exhausted. In order to prolong his life, he almost refined all his children. Xia Xiaohe is his only remaining daughter, but it seems that it's just his camouflage. So, the immortal king has already descended to the lower realm? Hey, the immortal world is almost finished. 9 regions is a place that we must pass to survive. We can't lose it at all. How could Xiaoyu not come in person? However, after eating my broken immortal king, I'm afraid he can't stay in this world anymore, so you don't have to worry about confronting Xiaoyu too early. It's a pity that I used the broken immortal king too hastily. Using immortal method against the immortal king, only the first time has the best effect. The second time, although my momentum was great, he had already seen through the mystery. Unfortunately, I have worked hard to prepare this immortal method for 5,000 years. Wang Lu was silent. Finally, there's one more thing I want to ask of you. Speak. Can you let me train you a little? I'm a fucking man. I don't even care who you are, so of course I don't care about your gender. For the sake of saving your life and getting rid of a big evil for you, please satisfy my little wish before I die. Chapter 804. On the wasteland, Wang Lu and the nine-tailed fox walked one after the other. The fox, who was known for her cunning and quick-wittedness, obediently followed 2 positions behind Wang Lu. Her every move was respectful. It was just that this well-behaved posture didn't last long. Because of boredom, the fox girl relaxed. Her footsteps began to jump and her eyes were full of curiosity as she looked around. Before long, the fox girl simply bounced around Wang Lu in a circle, asking him questions while circling around him. Where are we going? Right now, the situation in 9 regions should be very critical. Is it okay to take a slow walk like this? Seeing that Wang Lu ignored her, the fox girl pouted her mouth slightly, snorted, and ran a little farther away to tease a little monster in the wasteland who poked its head out curiously. After a while, the fox girl looked back at Wang Lu. Seeing that he was in a trance, she stood on tiptoe. As a result, the next moment, 2 cold eyes were cast on her, which made her footsteps suddenly freeze. The nine-tailed fox helplessly returned to Wang Lu's side and continued to accompany him in his boredom. After a long time, the fox girl couldn't bear the loneliness and took the initiative to find a topic. Speaking of which, you were really cunning just now. Wang Lu glanced at the fox girl. I'm seriously praising you. The word cunning is a first-class commendatory word for us heavenly foxes. If it were me, I wouldn't dare to refuse that kind of request made by that perverted Paksu before he died. The old perverted Pox's fierce reputation in the immortal world is very frightening. He is temperamental and can turn hostile at will. You can see that even his childhood sweetheart Xia Xiaohe's chest was dug out by him. If you dare to refuse him, he might use his own death to put a curse on you. However, if I were to be trained by that guy, I would feel that my life would be worse than death. So, I'm very convinced that you can successfully turn the tables in that situation. Wang Lu didn't want to talk about that topic. He just coldly snorted and warned her to shut up. However, once the curiosity of the nine-tailed fox was raised, it was difficult to calm down. The fox girl giggled recklessly, and then suddenly put her hands on her hips and imitated the tone of Wang Lu's speech at that time and said, "Senior Immortal Poxu, I can promise you to train her, but the specific method has to be changed." Then the fox girl turned around and imitated Senior Immortal Poxu. "How do you want to change it?" "I can train you, but our positions have to be switched. I'll be the one training you." "What did you say?" "Immortal Venerable, you've been trained your entire life and have countless exquisite and brilliant collections, but you've never been trained by anyone before, right?" "That's right." "Aren't you curious about what it feels like to be taught a lesson?" "I guess you must have been curious before, Immortal Venerable, but you have never met a trainer that you are willing to devote yourself to." "But I'm different. I know what I'm doing. Although I don't agree with some of your ideals, I can at least understand you. Senior Immortal will not live long. With your current physical condition, I'm afraid that even if you try your best, you are doomed to be unable to complete the perfect training and transformation. In that case, why don't you let go of this obsession and have a new experience at the last moment of your life?" "Are you really willing to do this to me?" Senior Immortal has eliminated a strong enemy in 9 regions and saved the common people. As the number 1 person in 9 regions, I have the obligation and am willing to send you on your last journey. With a solemn look on her face, the fox girl imitated Wang Lu's demeanor at that time vividly. Then, she flicked her backhand into the big furry tail behind her and took out a shiny black whip as well as several candles of different thickness. With a smile on her face, the fox girl waved the whip and said, "Senior Immortal, let's get started." Seeing this, Wang Lu finally couldn't bear it anymore and said, "Wait a minute. I don't remember this scene just now. And where did you get the whip and the candles from?" Seeing that Wang Lu was finally willing to talk to her, the fox girl giggled, threw the whip and the candles in her hand aside, and then hopped over and said, "I didn't see the end, so I could only imagine it myself. Later, you and Senior Immortal Poxa went somewhere and did this and that. I was waiting anxiously. You don't need to know what you shouldn't know." Wang Lu's face was gloomy, and he didn't want to mention a word about what happened at that time. Although it was much better to be a trainer than to be trained, it was not a history worth showing off. "Don't be so cold. Tell me what you did with him. I'm really curious. How about you tell me and I warm your bed?" Wang Lu sneered and said, "Enough, fox girl. Do you think I will let you go just because you jest like this? You don't really want to kill me, do you?" The 9-tailed fox immediately put on a pitiful look and said, I don't want to. At that time, I was also forced by Poxa to do something to Feng Yin, and I really didn't kill him. He's still alive and well. You know what I'm talking about? Are you talking about Feng Ling?" The 9-tailed fox finally couldn't laugh. "Do you want me to return to the appearance of Feng Ling?" Wang Lu didn't speak, but turned around and looked at her seriously. "It's not impossible to restore to Feng Ling. I still retain her memory and personality, but that means death for me." As the fox girl spoke, her 9 furry tails spread out into a fan, and each tail was surrounded by an astonishing amount of energy. "I don't want to die. No matter who it is, no matter what the reason is, I don't want to die. If you want me to die, then come and kill me with your own hands." Wang Lu didn't make his move. Of course he could kill her. Although the 9-tailed fox was an immortal beast, Wang Lu was now the number 1 person in 9 regions who was strong enough to face the fallen immortal head-on. It would be easy for him to kill her. And the sealing spell that Feng Yin Taoist master used at great cost could also be easily reproduced by him. However, Wang Lu still didn't make his move, because someone was stopping him. In Wang Lu's eyes, inside the body of the 9-tailed fox, there was a small figure of a girl, who was shaking her head vigorously at him, indicating that she couldn't. "You don't want me to kill her? Because she's a good person? Are you retarded? You insist? Feng Ling, this is the first time I know that you are so soft-hearted. This is related to your life, so don't act like a Virgin Mary at this time, okay? Damn it, can't you be reasonable? What do you mean by I have to think of a way to get the best of both worlds? Do you think of me as a universal wishing machine? Yes, I have created a lot of miracles, but things that I can't do are things that I can't do. You and her soul and body are one, so there's no way to separate them. Otherwise, do you think I can't think of a way to use a blank body puppet to inject the soul? You say, wait until the technology is developed to the point where it can be separated? Who knows that it will take tens of thousands of years? The blue leopard cat from the future that I told you in the past is a fairy tale, not a historical record. In an instant, Wang Lu had a long conversation with the small voice in the fox girl's body. However, he still couldn't convince the other party. Feng Ling was unusually unreasonable on this matter. And Wang Lu didn't intend to forcibly disobey her wishes. Feng Ling's temperament was different from that of other people. She was very unyielding. If he really angered her, he might as well ignore her. Very well, whatever you want. Finally, Wang Lu gave up the idea of persuading Feng Ling. He disconnected the connection and then looked up at the nine-tailed fox. You're indeed a fox. You're really cunning. After the fox was awakened by Paksu, she didn't rush to crush Feng Ling, who occupied her for 100 years. Instead, she preserved her memory and personality independently, which was obviously a backup plan for herself. In addition, Feng Ling's strange insistence was certainly influenced by the fox. Most likely, she had quietly communicated with Feng Ling before and persuaded Feng Ling to save her life with flowery words. This was not difficult. Feng Ling had a stubborn temperament, but she was essentially a kind-hearted girl. It was normal for her to be deceived by the fox. But what was really rare was that all this happened during the time when the fox followed senior immortal Paksu. She had been preparing for two things from the beginning, and this second preparation really worked and saved her life. This was really cunning. The nine-tailed fox giggled and then said, "Thank you for not killing me. In return, I will stand on your side and help you with all my strength in the next battle." Nonsense, you betrayed the immortal world and have been on the same line as us for a long time. Why don't you try your best? Don't put it so bluntly. In short, what do you want me to do next? After a moment of contemplation, Wang Lu was about to speak when his body suddenly shook and he raised his head to look into the distance. This is really troublesome. She actually chose this time. But it's also good. Fox, I have something to ask of you. Go to Area 51, take 2 teams of Zaku, and then go straight to Heavenly Sage Hall of the Zhongzhou Wanxian League and beat up all the people who are quarreling there. The nine-tailed fox blinked her eyes and said, Everyone? Everyone, as long as you see someone who dares to talk nonsense, just do it directly. If someone resists by force, I allow you to kill them on the spot. Even if the other party is Supreme Hichu? Even if it's the Elder of Heavenly Sword Hall. Those who dare to add oil to the fire at this time will all be dealt with quickly. When it came to the last sentence, Wang Lu's anger was obvious. Just after receiving the news, when Wang Wu was lost in the crack in the sky and Tetragon brought people to the emergency rescue, the internal strife between the Wanxian League and Dixian broke out in Xingjing sect in Zhongzhou. A group of idiots completely ignored the seriousness of the current situation and scolded each other in the Heavenly Sage Hall. What was even more shameful was that they didn't even block the good news, letting the world know about their internal strife, which made their morale shaky. I didn't have time to deal with it for a while, but it actually became like this. In the past 15 years, I have indeed killed too few people. The nine-tailed fox wagged her tail and said, However, now that 9 regions is weaker than the immortal world, isn't it not good to do it to our own people at this time? Wang Lu coldly said, At this time, internal strife is not worthy of being one of us. Haha, that's straightforward. But you don't do it yourself but entrust me to do it. Do you really trust me? I trust your cunning. Wang Lu lightly said, A cunning fox should know what to do now. Chapter 805. Wang Lu sent the nine-tailed fox to the central region to suppress the internal strife and riots because of 2 considerations. First, he himself had other arrangements. The situation in the front line of the crack in the sky was already precarious. Since Wang Wu lost contact, Tetragon led a group of Dixian to the scene as soon as possible and formed a solid line of defense. This was an emergency strategy that had been set long ago. However, the so-called emergency naturally could not last long. Tetragon's line of defense persisted for a period of time, and then crumbled under the endless impact of the servant army. Once the line of defense was broken, the situation in 9 regions would be extremely critical. At this time, the only one who was qualified to go to the front line to support and turn the tide was Wang Lu. Second, the work in Heavenly Sage Hall was dirty work. If possible, Wang Lu didn't want to do it himself. Cleaning up the situation by ruthless means meant that it was inevitable to cause killing. And those who could speak in Heavenly Sage Hall were all important members of some large sects and organizations. As the number 1 person in 9 regions, Wang Lu didn't want to be alone so early. The war with the fallen immortal was a long-term war, and there were many future jobs that depended on his personal reputation. It was not worthwhile to turn into a tyrant too early. Fox, prove the value of your existence to me. After explaining the last sentence, Wang Lu walked in the wasteland for a while, combing through the next part of the overall plan. After confirming that it was correct, he suddenly stamped his foot on the ground, causing the land within 100 miles of the wasteland to crack and soften. Then, borrowing the recoil force, he soared into the sky. The wind in the astral wind layer was like a knife. The higher the altitude, the sharper the wind blade. Wang Lu went all the way up into the astral wind layer. It was not until the ground under his feet had become dark and invisible, and the friction between the astral wind and his body began to produce incandescent heat, that he finally stopped his momentum. Wang Lu tried to exhale lightly, but found that the wind that swept around him formed a great pressure that he could not even exhale a breath. Thankfully, his synchronization rate with the Colossus had reached a certain level, allowing him to boast the indestructible feature of the Colossus. Otherwise, he would have been blown apart immediately. In the past few hundred years, no one had reached such heights. Therefore, no one would be able to charge down from such a great height and accumulate an endless amount of impact force. Wang Lu turned his body in the astral wind layer, head down and feet up. Then he fell down like a meteor with irresistible force. Nothing could stop him. Along the way, Wang Lu guided the violent astral wind. Like a traveler who had found a guide, the wind whistled behind Wang Lu. Not long after, there were hundreds of millions of blades made of wind behind Wang Lu, like an army of a king. Wang Lu fell faster and faster. Very soon, he broke through the darkness of the astral wind layer, pierced through the thick clouds, and saw the ugly scar that was torn in midair above the vast blue river region. It was the scar of the sky. He saw the army of servant soldiers descending from the immortal realm. He saw Tetragon fighting a bloody battle. At the same time, the battle in the scar of the sky was on the verge of collapse. From the moment Wang Wu fell into the enemy's hands, Senior Gem Emperor led the team to rush here as soon as possible. It was only a short period of half a day, but the line of defense had been in crisis several times. It was all because of the Earth Immortals who risked their lives and fought with their lives that they were finally able to repel those ferocious servant soldiers. The process was really unimaginably difficult. The Dixian people thought that since they had fought head-on with the Immortals of the Immortal Realm, it should be easy to resist the enemy who was mainly made up of servant soldiers. However, they soon found that the servant soldiers of different appearances had extremely strong combat power. Most of their individual strength was beyond the level of the Supreme of the Wanxian League, comparable to the Mahayana practitioners, and comparable to ordinary Dixian people. However, Tetragon's team only had 30 or 40 people, but the opponent was almost 10 times as many. These servant soldiers were driven by the Immortals to fight in all directions all year round, so they had a very tacit understanding with each other. On the other hand, the team brought by Tetragon was more or less a motley crew. Many of them were Dixian people with cultivation base but little actual combat experience. In the previous war they were logistics personnel. Now that 9 regions was short of manpower, they were forced to participate in the war. Their combat efficiency was completely incomparable to that of the servant soldiers of the Immortal Realm. Were it not for the fact that this battle took place at the end of the passage, where one man could hold the pass against 10,000 enemies, Tetragon and the others would not even be able to hold on for half a day. At this time, when they recalled that Wang Wu single-handedly blocked the army of the Immortal Realm here for several days, it was simply awe-inspiring. Unfortunately, before they had the time to revere Wang Wu, they were already unable to protect themselves. After countless tearing, a fatal loophole was finally torn open in the line of defense. Because Xuan Xian Lu Biechen, who presided over the array, used the immortal calculation too frequently, his immortal spirit was temporarily exhausted and his primordial spirit fainted. With him as the node, the network of 5 Dixian around him suddenly stagnated. Several pitch-black, snake-like beasts spotted the opening and immediately pounced over. The protective immortal technique that the Dixian hastily activated was broken by them and could not stop them at all. When Tetragon arrived, Lu Biechen's limbs and head had been bitten by those strange beasts. Then, with a sudden force, his body was immediately torn apart, and even his primordial spirit could not escape. Biechen? Tetragon's eyes turned red. However, before she could use her immortal technique to kill those black strange beasts, an invisible sword pierced her body from behind and came out from her chest. At the same time, several cold eyes suddenly opened in front of her, which made Tetragon's heart turn cold. Completely invisible assassins. A killing array that surrounded her from all sides. This was a trap specially designed for her, using Liu Biechen's death as bait to lure her from her mobile position, and then kill her with one blow. These invisible assassins should be one of the most elite few among the servant soldiers in the immortal world. Their ability to hide and burst far exceeded that of ordinary servant soldiers, and was not inferior to that of real immortals. If Tetragon was in her peak state, she might be able to contend with them. However, in the past 10 years she had devoted most of her energy to Wang Lu, and her own injuries had not fully healed, so her strength was only 70% to 80% of her peak state. The 20% to 30% difference was the key to whether she could get out of this dangerous situation or not. The stab on her back was extremely serious, and what was more fatal were the next few stab. She had no confidence that she could avoid any of them, and it seemed that she would definitely die. Around her, more companions rushed over in panic, trying to rescue Tetragon, but this only made Tetragon more desperate. It didn't matter if she died. She was in a mobile position in the team, not the core. Even if she died, as long as others held their positions, there would still be room for delay. But now the result would be total annihilation. However, at this moment Tetragon suddenly saw a light. A strong light came from above the sky, cutting through the clouds and the sky. The light was so dazzling, 100 times more blazing than the sun, that even Tetragon, the king of Dixian, had to squint her eyes and could only see the outline. The light was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, it came from the horizon, sweeping in front of Tetragon with endless heat. In just a moment, Tetragon felt that the hair in front of her forehead was burned. It was the long hair of immortals that would not change color even if it was soaked in lava, but now it was burned. Then she also saw countless streaks of blood in front of her eyes. The invisible assassins that surrounded her turned into countless pieces of meat without saying a word, and then were swept away by the high temperature and turned into smoke. The hundreds of servant soldiers who rushed out of the crack in the sky, along with the invisible assassins, were evaporated by the high temperature after being cut into thousands of pieces by the invisible sharp blades. The crisis that left the Dixian helpless was actually solved in an instant. The light didn't stop, it directly rushed into the inside of the crack in the sky. After that, people only felt that there was a blur in front of them, and then the ugly scar that hovered in the sky slowly disappeared. The passage from the immortal world to the 9 regions was directly dispersed by this light. After no one knew how long, cheers came from all directions. At first they were scattered, but soon they gathered. In addition to the earth immortals who were fighting fiercely in midair, there were also those cultivators who had been supplying the spiritual chi of heaven and earth to this place. All of them gathered and cheered for the unexpected victory. However, Tetragon couldn't laugh. That light was a strong light that was difficult for others to look directly at, but she vaguely saw a familiar figure. No, even if she couldn't see it, she would not mistake it for the familiar smell. It was Wang Lu. At this time, the only one who could reverse the situation in an instant with his own strength was Wang Lu. However, even though he managed to salvage the situation, he lost himself in the passageway. Was this also in his calculation? Unfortunately, before she could think about it, Tetragon was surrounded by happy people. People laughed and shouted around her, and the noise made it difficult for her to calm down and think. Not long after, a Dixian flew over with a livid face and said something in Tetragon's ear. The Heavenly Sage Hall was massacred, and a large number of cultivators of the Wanxian League died tragically. Chapter 806. Who else is not convinced? Who else thinks that you can bully the Dixian people? Please stand up and let us have a look at you as soon as possible. The corner of the 9-tailed fox's mouth hooked up, revealing a sarcastic smile. A pair of slightly red eyes scanned the surroundings, only to see countless drooping heads. This was the Heavenly Sage Hall, the highest authority of the Wanxian League in 9 regions. After thousands of years of operation, it was majestic and magnificent. Right now, the magnificent hall, which was known as the closest to fairyland in 9 regions, had been filled with a strong smell of blood. Hundreds of corpses lay scattered on the ground. The broken flesh and bones almost formed a thick blanket, which made the hall gloomy and terrifying. All of this was because of the arrival of a group of uninvited guests. A humanized 9-tailed fox and 12 inferior bodies of the giant divine weapons of different shapes openly went on a killing spree in the Heavenly Sage Hall, killing the opponents until the blood flowed like a river. In the face of the silence in the hall, the 9-tailed fox sighed in disappointment and said, "That's it? Weren't you guys very strong-willed just now?" Some said that they wanted to teach us a lesson on behalf of Wang Lu. Some said that they wanted to take advantage of the situation to overthrow the rule of the tyrant Wang Lu, and return the 9 regions to peace and harmony. Some said that they wanted to uproot us and the Dixian people and suppress us forever. Why don't you say anything now? Under a towering jade pillar in the hall, there was an old man with white hair and a ruddy face leaning on the pillar. There was a bloody wound on his chest, from which blood gurgled out, which could not be stopped. While gasping heavily, he pointed his trembling finger at the nine-tailed fox and said, "You guys, how dare you commit such a heinous crime in this sacred place? Even if you kill us all today, can you kill all the righteous people in the world? You colluded with the Dixian people and now." The nine-tailed fox rolled her eyes, and then made a gesture with her slender hand behind her and said, "Luli, give him a quick death." As soon as her voice fell, a clear sword shadow flew out from the side of the fox girl and cut the old man and the jade pillar behind him into two. The person who made the sword strike was Luli. She was the first pilot of the experimental machine in 9 regions. After more than 5 years of training and cultivation, at this time, the synchronization rate with the experimental machine had reached more than 90%, which was comparable to the tyrannical fighting power of the Dixian people. She was one of the best among the same batch of pilots. It was just that, after this sword strike, Luli hesitantly took a step back and put the immortal sword back into the scabbard. As the pilot of Xiagu, the first thing to do was to obey absolutely. Now that Wang Lu was not here and authorized the nine-tailed fox, even if her order was absurd and unruly, it must be strictly implemented. The fox girl smiled and glanced at Luli and said, "You've worked hard, you. You can of Lulu that you can you Xia you but Xia you can do you." The fox girl smiled and glanced at Luli and said, "You've worked hard. You can go back and rest now. You've worked hard today." Luli nodded gratefully and then, without saying much, left the Heavenly Sage Hall and the central region in the blink of an eye. She returned to the distant Area 51 of Blue River region, no longer caring about the dispute here. As soon as Luli left, someone immediately made an application. "I also want to withdraw, can I?" Zhou Mumu said unhappily, "Those who oppose, those who cause trouble, and those who threaten have all been killed by you. Now even if we're not here you can control the scene alone, right?" The fox girl rejected Zhou Mumu's request. "No, you have to stay here because the people who conspire against us have not been cleaned up, and the work has to continue." "Haven't been cleaned up? I say that's enough." Zhou Mumu was a bit annoyed and said, "Even if Wang Lu asked you to lead us to clean up the situation, aren't you going too far now?" "Too far?" The fox girl raised her eyebrows and looked at Zhou Mumu playfully. "Do you really think I'm going too far, or are you angry because of the high-level participation of your Kunlun immortal sect in this rebellion?" "Enough, I have nothing to say to you. Do what you want." The fox girl laughed and then looked around. Sure enough, she saw a lot of expectant eyes. The dispute between her and the test machine pilots was seen by everyone, and everyone was looking forward to the further outbreak of contradictions. Once they had an internal strife, the defeated soldiers in the hall would immediately counterattack. To be honest, the fox girl was looking forward to that scene because she could kill some more people and make the deterrence stronger. However, if she really killed too many people, she was afraid that things would not be good when Wang Lu came back. Therefore, the fox girl had to regretfully put down the idea and said in a clear voice, "You little rascals, give up the idea of getting lucky as soon as possible. Look around you, what kind of people are standing and lying down? They're nothing more than wandering characters. Which high-level members of the 5 major sects are here? None of the elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall of the Lingjian School are here. Even the senior deacons of the Spirit Pool Peak are not here. They only sent the newly promoted dead fatty when Bao here to deal with the errands. Only a few peripheral elders of Xingjing sect are here, while the people of 10,000 Arts sect are purely here for sightseeing. And the group of upright madmen in Royal Soldier sect were also sick and absent from work. Except for a few ignorant old farts of Kunlun Immortal sect who came to stir the water, how many heavyweights are there in the Heavenly Sage Hall today?" Looking at the gradually bewildered eyes around her, the nine-tailed fox sneered and then said, "A group of speculators. They think that their strength is strong enough to occupy the mainstream. They dare to use the precious friendship of the Wanxian League and Dixian as a stepping stone and wantonly hype. It's ridiculous that you can't see that the whole world is waiting to see how you die. Today I'm just doing it for someone else. If I don't do it, others will do it sooner or later." At this time, a seemingly simple and upright old cultivator frowned and said, "It's true that some people are a bit too extreme when dealing with Dixian, but don't you think it's too much for you to kill so many people indiscriminately?" The nine-tailed fox swayed her tail and said, "Too much? What's too much about cutting a tangled knot? If we don't kill all of these rascals today, there will be more people who will think that they have the advantage in numbers. If they group together to demonstrate, they can confuse right and wrong and pester endlessly. At that time, there will only be more people who need to be killed. The peaceful days have been too long. Even the threat of the fallen immortals is not taken seriously. A group of garbage-like things roared and gathered, pulled banners and shouted slogans, and said a few words of fairness and justice, and the righteousness of 9 regions. Unexpectedly, they could also get the support of people all the way to the Heavenly Sage Hall. In the past 15 years, when Wang Lu had no time to be distracted, the Heavenly Sage Hall has indeed gone a bit too far. Today, by washing it with flesh and blood, it can also be regarded as purification. The words of the 9-tailed fox were so vicious that the cultivators in the hall felt restless. There will be speculators at any time. This is an unavoidable evil in any political organization. The 9-tailed fox lightly said, so, on the contrary, we must always keep an eye on the elimination of these speculators. Today I was entrusted by Wang Lu to prune the branches and cut the leaves for you. It seems that the speculators have been almost cleaned up. In the future, I hope you can solve these problems by yourself. Don't expect Wang Lu to save the situation every time. After all, it's an organization that has ruled the Wanxian League for so many years. Without Wang Lu, can't it even work? The 9-tailed fox brought up the name of Wang Lu several times, and finally suppressed the last group of restless cultivators. No one in the Heavenly Sage Hall dared to have any strange thoughts. They only hoped that this killing god would leave as soon as possible. And the 9-tailed fox did not intend to stay for too long. It was enough for the task here to be completed to this point. If she continued to suppress it, it would easily have the opposite effect. She and the 12 experimental machines were indeed powerful, but if they were really attacked by a group of people, it was inevitable that they would be outnumbered. Just now, they were able to sweep the Saint Hall and kill more than 100 unknown cultivators because the real rulers of the Saint Hall acquiesced to all of this. That was all. As for what kind of political deal there was behind the scenes, it was not what the 9-tailed fox could care about. After all, she was just an agent of Wang Lu, so there was no need to be so deeply involved. Now that the problem was solved by the prestige of Wang Lu and the tyrannical fighting power of the 12 experimental machines, it was the right thing to withdraw as soon as possible. However, just as the 9-tailed fox was about to leave, suddenly a cultivator rushed in from the outside and shouted as soon as he entered the door. Not good. In order to save Taoist Master Non-Phase, Wang Lu rushed into the crack in the sky and disappeared with it. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Almost in an instant, there was a buzzing sound in the Heavenly Sage Hall, which was the voices of countless people gathered together. This news was so important that no one could ignore it. In order to save Wang Lu was lost in the crack in the sky. The crack in the sky was a passage that was forcibly opened by the immortal world to 9 regions. If the crack in the sky disappeared, it meant that the master and disciple were locked in the immortal world. It also meant that they were dead. And if Wang Lu died, what should they do next? At this moment, even the 9-tailed fox was stunned for a moment. But soon she found that she didn't need to worry about this problem, because someone stepped forward in time. It was Hua who made the move. A red light crossed the Saint Hall and directly pierced the forehead of the reporting cultivator. Then Hua coldly said, "Deceiving people with lies is unforgivable." In an instant, there was a dead silence in the Heavenly Sage Hall. Everyone's eyes were focused on Hua as if they were swords and spears. However, the woman was unmoved. She indifferently withdrew the Kill Immortal sword in her right hand and no longer paid attention to anyone. However, anyone with vision could see that her blow just now was like turning the tide and pulling the situation back from the brink of deterioration. Yes, perhaps Wang Lu had really been lost in the crack in the sky, or perhaps the passage had really disappeared. But so what? She was pointing a deer at a horse. Even if Wang Lu was really gone, the huge legacy left by him after 15 years of running 9 regions could still suppress all the thieves and thieves. The experimental machine in Area 5-1 was just one of them. Hua's sword strike reminded everyone in the most shocking way. You guys don't have the qualification to make trouble. Hua's synchronization rate was not the highest among this group of pilots, and it was even slightly inferior to Lu Li. Some people said that she had exhausted her talent, while others said that she had doubts about this synchronization mechanism. But in short, in the past few years, her performance in Area 51 was not outstanding. It was not until this moment that everyone realized that the lead disciple of Xingjing's sect was indeed worthy of her reputation. However, even if Hua's sword strike temporarily stabilized the situation, as long as Wang Lu did not appear, it would not solve the root cause. And at this time, what happened to Wang Lu? Chapter 807. In the passage between the two worlds, the long-lost master and disciple reunited. However, there was no touching kiss and tears, no affectionate look at each other and confide in each other. There was only an awkward atmosphere of looking at each other. The woman in white took the lead in launching an attack. She squinted her eyes, frowned and pouted her mouth. "Jesuke, what are you doing here?" Wang Lu was shocked by this attitude and said, "Is this your attitude towards people who risked their lives to rescue you? Have you been ked silly by that Yen Luo? What the hell, are you blind? Which eye of yours saw me being ked? I was the one who used the telepathic finger to play with that woman until she was and she almost became dead set on me. You still say that you haven't been ked silly? Tell me, where is that Yen Luo who is dead set on you? Is she hiding behind you and working silently?" Wang Wu was so angry that her almond-shaped eyes widened and she angrily scolded, "You have eyes but no eyes, how dare you say that? If it weren't for you rushing over like a burnt egg, I would have pressed her under my body and ked her wantonly. Give me back my Yen Luo." Seeing that Wang Wu was unusually arrogant, Wang Lu also became suspicious. Looking at her again, although her appearance was a little embarrassed and there were countless minor injuries on her body, her vital parts were still well protected. Although the fluctuation of magical power was weak, it was stable. If he opened his immortal eyes to take a closer look, so many king pills? Are you crazy? Have you designed the new version of non-phase method? Do you want to do this kind of overclocking thing? Wang Wu gave him an angry look and said, "What else? The 9 regions great array suddenly broke and you want me to fight the fallen immortals alone with the original king pill? Do you really want me to be pressed to the ground by that Yen Luo? That's not necessarily impossible. Don't you always boast that your telepathic finger magical power is so great that even the true immortals in the upper realm can't escape your control? You can start from the bottom and then turn over little by little to become the master. Being trained by the overbearing immortal to be trained by the overbearing immortal, what a tragic and inspiring story. If you say so, why don't you try to pick on Xia Xiaohe and turn her into your exclusive property? Don't tell me you want to admit that the power of your spear is inferior to my finger?" When Wang Lu heard her mention Xia Xiaohe, his face suddenly became ugly. "Fortunately, I didn't think of this kind of crooked way. Otherwise I would be miserable." Xia Xiaohe was a soft and juicy girl, but her real body, Xiaoyu, was a withered old man. Wang Lu was still interested in soft girls, so the old man politely declined. "Wait, it seems like you've changed the topic. I haven't held you accountable for disturbing the prey. Damn it, if you hadn't recklessly rushed over, I would have succeeded." Wang Wu complained while honestly telling Wang Lu everything that happened before. In the beginning, Wang Wu relied on the support of the great array of 9 regions to counterattack. As a result, as soon as she entered the passage in the crack in the sky, her food supply was cut off, and she fell into danger in an instant. The conversation with Wang Lu was interrupted at that time. Her opponent was the true immortal Yen Luo. Although she could not be ranked among the senior immortals in terms of fighting power alone, she was the deputy of senior immortal Xiaoyao. She ruled the army of servants in the immortal world. She was best at teamwork and seizing opportunities. Naturally, she would not miss this opportunity. She commanded her army of servants to cross the passage and raid 9 regions, while she herself, with the cooperation of her elite guards, quickly suppressed Wang Wu. However, Wang Wu made the right response in the first place. She brought out the beta version of non-phase method. Using this as the core, she connected most of the king pill that could be used at present and burst out with heaven-defying power in a short period of time. Yen Luo, who was originally prepared to take advantage of the situation, was suddenly passive. This unexpected change disrupted her overall calculation. She was surprised to find that although the opponent was just an outer path cultivator from the lower realm who lived in the 9 regions, she already had the strength to fight against the immortals head-on. No, she was even above them. With a combat power close to the level of senior immortal, she could suppress Yen Luo and the 3 guards by herself. This was the power that Wang Wu showed at that moment. Thus, Yen Luo immediately changed her strategy. She no longer tried to suppress Wang Wu, but to contain her, hold her back, and take this opportunity to let as many servant legions enter the 9 regions as possible. She tried to distract Wang Wu in this way. As a result, Wang Wu was indeed a bit distracted. She was constantly injured and in a precarious situation. This convinced Yen Luo that she had chosen the right strategy. Wang Wu was indeed the indispensable guardian of the 9 regions. Thus, she accelerated the speed of the servant soldiers entering the 9 regions, trying to further contain Wang Wu. Then, when most of the servant soldiers in the passage had left Yanluo's side, Wang Wu immediately changed her face. She very indifferently let the servant soldiers rush to the exit of the passage, and her eyes never turned back. His bewildered demeanor from before was nowhere to be found. At this time, Yanluo naturally knew that she had been fooled and wanted to call back the servant soldiers. However, the servant soldiers were blocked by a non-phase sword defense and could not come back. Then, everyone found that Wang Wu actually occupied the narrowest point in the passage at this time, and the special terrain was too suitable for the non-phase sword defense. While easily blocking the servant soldiers, she began to suppress Yanluo with all her strength. After all, Yanluo's single combat power was inferior, so she soon fell into a disadvantageous position. She was even controlled by Wang Wu for a time and experienced the wonderful taste of the telepathic finger, until Wang Lu turned into a meteor and went straight in from the ninth heaven. Wang Lu's scamper swept away all the ghosts and demons, and also broke the cage set up by Wang Wu, so that Yanluo had a chance to escape from her control. After listening to all this, Wang Lu really had nothing to say. It turned out that his painstaking efforts, even at the cost of his origin, to rescue her, turned out to be a wrong move. Logically speaking, Wang Lu's judgment at that time was not wrong. With the strength of Wang Wu in her normal state, it was impossible for her to fight against an immortal head-on. The explosion of the beta version of the non-phase method was more or less luck. But because of this, Wang Wu's failure seemed to be even more regrettable. In short, it's good that you're okay. After thinking about it, Wang Lu could only use this sentence as the result of the dispute between the two. Then he took a step forward and hugged the other party tightly. The woman in his arms struggled a little and questioned with some dissatisfaction, "Do you want to fool me in this way?" Wang Lu thought about it. Indeed, he was too insincere, so he slightly changed his strategy. In addition to the hug, he also gave her a deep kiss. The other party did not refuse. After a long time, their lips parted. Wang Wu looked at the large scorch marks and scars caused by the friction of the astral wind on Wang Lu's body, and sighed softly, "You are simply unreasonable. You ruined my good thing, and yet you still have the face to take advantage of me?" Wang Lu thought about it again. Since hugging and kissing couldn't solve the problem, he could only do it for real. It just so happened that she also mentioned the comparison between the telepathic finger and a certain godly spear, so he might as well take this opportunity to practice it. F***ck, your brain must have been fried, right? Do you still have the mind to untie my belt at this time? Haven't you been squeezed by Tetragon enough in the past few years? Wang Wu looked at the hand that popped into her arms and waist. She was shocked by the low limit of the man in front of her. "Little Lu, I'm so moved. You have finally surpassed your master. From now on, the low limit of 9 regions will be handed over to you. But, seriously, aren't you too ambitious to do things in such a place? Yanluo is not dead yet." Wang Lu smiled and said, "It doesn't matter if she's dead or not. I'm here." Would she dare to look back? But this is really not the place to do things. Let's go back to 9 regions first. Before he finished speaking, he couldn't go on, because he had already sensed that the exit of the passage behind him had disappeared. The next moment, in the depths of the passage ahead, a woman with a light figure slowly appeared. The red gem on her forehead was particularly eye-catching. Yanluo? Wang Wu immediately became vigilant. Regardless of her disheveled clothes, she had already stood in front of Wang Lu and put on a fighting posture. Although what Wang Lu said just now was very nice, anyone could see that he had paid an astonishing price for diving down from the 9th heaven. At least in a short period of time, he should not be involved in the battle again. Therefore, although it would certainly hurt someone's face, Wang Wu still firmly stood in front of Wang Lu. Yanluo was not an easy enemy to deal with. Her fighting power was not strong, but her means were too many. If it weren't for the beta version of the non-phase method that disrupted her strategy, Wang Wu didn't think she could defeat her. Therefore, Yanluo standing here at this time must mean that there was a great difficulty behind her. If there was really any trouble, then let her taste it first. Everything was just like the catastrophe more than 100 years ago, except that the positions of the two sides were finally reversed. "Don't be so nervous. I have no intention of fighting with you." Yanluo's voice was very soft, which was a bit more lazy and relaxed than when she commanded the army. "Moreover, there is no need for us to fight at all because we are doomed to die together. This passage has been cut off by me and has become a fragment floating in the endless void. Without the support of the upper and lower realms, it is only a matter of time before it dies. In that case, why don't we put down each other's position and hatred and coexist peacefully in the last moment of our lives?" Wang Wu coldly said, "Since it's the last moment, why put on the false coat of peace? Isn't it better to choose a more indulgent way? Yenluo said with a smile, sure, whether it's telepathic finger or something else, you can use it if you want. You can also kill me. In any case, the final result is the same. Wang Wu was silent, trying to guess how much of the other party's words were true. What I said is true. I'm afraid there won't be a second chance for the two strongest people in 9 regions to perish together with me. I will never miss it. So, I really want to thank Wang Lu. Wang Wu's eyes became sharp and said, very well, then I'll do as you wish and let your death be a bit more worthwhile. However, before she could make a move, she was pressed by Wang Lu on the shoulder. Wait a minute, I think we might as well consider her suggestion. Since it's the last moment of life, let's spend it peacefully. With that, Wang Lu turned his head and gave Yenluo a sincere and brilliant smile. Chapter 808. I'm glad you think so. Let's get along well in the future. Yenluo showed a relaxed smile, nodded to the two people opposite her, and then turned to leave. Wait a minute, where are you going? Yenluo pointed to the darkness ahead and said, it's not far away. This passage has begun to disintegrate from both ends, so you don't have to worry about me going too far. But I think you two need to be alone now, so it's not convenient for me to disturb you. Wang Lu said, there's no need for that. I'm more interested in you now than her. Wang Wu coughed and said, saying these words in front of me, should I express some anger? Wang Lu ignored her and still stared at Yenluo's eyes and said, since there are only the 3 of us at the last moment of our lives, why should we distinguish each other so clearly? We should strengthen communication and enhance friendship. I just have a few questions to ask you. If it's about the secret of the immortal world, I'm afraid I can't give you the answer you want. Why should people care about confidentiality when they are about to die? Unless this passage is not as doomed as you said, and we still have the possibility of returning to 9 regions with the secret. When Yenluo heard this, she couldn't help but smile and said, think whatever you want. It's okay if you want to talk, but don't expect to get information from me. Wang Lu thought for a moment and said, okay, I won't get information from you. It's just a normal chat. Yenluo stood still and said, okay, what do you want to talk about? Wang Lu pointed to her chest and said, let's start with your 3 measurements. Before he finished speaking, Wang Wu's voice came from behind him, B-Cup, do you still need to ask? What about your professionalism? Wang Lu was really indignant at this malicious behavior. It was just a chat, why did she take it so seriously? Yenluo, on the other hand, covered her chest and said, she's right, and then? Wang Lu said, I want to say, although it's a little thin, your figure is still good. It's better than the little princess of your immortal world. When Xia Xiaohe was mentioned, although Yenluo's expression did not change, the ruby on her forehead flashed. Therefore Wang Lu immediately followed this topic. She should be quite popular in the immortal world, right? Yenluo moved her lips slightly, but she did not answer. This shouldn't be a secret, right? Don't use the excuse that everything about the royal family is a secret to perfunctory me. Otherwise, I will immediately stop the plan of peaceful coexistence and go all out to break through this passage. Although there is a great probability that it will accelerate the destruction of the passage, but perhaps there is a 1 in 10,000 chance that I can successfully return to 9 regions? Don't forget, traveling between worlds is my forte. When Yenluo heard this, the gem on her forehead flashed twice again. Alright, since you insist. The little princess is indeed very likable in the world of immortals. She's smart, powerful, and gentle. Everyone I know likes her very much. Wang Lu smiled and said, I'm afraid that's not true. She is indeed smart and gentle, but she is very dangerous. Because she can hide the sharp blade with a gentle disguise. This time, several people from your immortal world came to 9 regions one after another, and only she posed the strongest threat. She actually instigated 2 of our loyal generals to rebel, and she almost instigated more people to rebel. This is really a remarkable achievement. Yenluo was silent for a moment and then said, although the little princess is easy to talk to, we do respect and love her, but we also fear her. She is the most proud bloodline of His Majesty the Immortal King. This time, when we come to the lower realm with her, you actually have no chance. Wang Lu said, oh? You have so much confidence in her? Unfortunately, she's dead. Yenluo trembled visibly and said, impossible? Do you need me to replay her tragic death to you with a projection technique? To be honest, I don't want to do that. Although the little princess is a beauty, her tragic death is not very good. That's impossible. How could you, a group of people from the lower realm, hurt the little princess? Wang Lu said with a smile, that's not a good question. The skill that can kill the bloodline of the immortal king is, of course, the highest secret in 9 regions. How could it be so simple to tell you? Look, now we finally have a topic of common interest, secret. You have the secret that I want, and I also have the secret that you want. So, why don't we be more open and honest? Yanluo was silent for a long time and then nodded. Wang Lu said, "Let me ask a question first. The opening of this passage should be quite difficult for the immortal world. But you did not hesitate to destroy the passage. There should be a reason for this. For example, you guessed that I was sent here by Xia Xiaohe, and all of this was her plan? At the same time, the immortal world has the means to open a second passage?" Yanluo said, "Yes, I did think that the little princess sent you here, and the immortal world does have the ability to open a second passage. However, only one passage can be opened at a time, and the price is not cheap. My question is, who exactly are you?" Wang Lu said with a smile, "It seems that Xia Xiaohe didn't tell you. Well, I'll be frank. I'm a native of 9 regions. Of course, I'm a bit different from those mediocre people. I've seen a lot of big scenes outside." Yanluo nodded thoughtfully. "Next, it's my turn to ask. Tell me about the immortal king Xiaoyu." "His Majesty the immortal king is our most respected leader," Yanluo replied dryly. "His will is our highest mission." Wang Lu smiled and said, "All right, I think I understand. He is the unquestionable king of the immortal world, but his reputation doesn't seem to be very good. It is said that he is an inhuman tyrant? If that's the case, do you want to consider joining us and overthrow the brutal rule of the immortal king together?" Yanluo's expression immediately became cold. "If you continue to talk, I don't think there's any need for peaceful coexistence." "I understand. For me to say so much, your attitude is actually quite obvious. Then let's change the topic about Paksu." Next, Wang Lu and Yanluo asked and answered questions for a long time. During this period, the topic was not only limited to the secrets of the immortal world. Occasionally, Wang Lu would also talk about the customs of 9 regions to test the other party's reaction. Sometimes Yanluo would ignore it, and sometimes she would pretend to be interested. Of course, most of the time she was also trying to find out the secrets of 9 regions. Wang Lu answered honestly one by one. As for Wang Wu, halfway through the question and answer session, she went to sleep out of boredom. When she woke up, she saw that the two were still talking and laughing. "You two don't really want to have a great friendship, do you?" Hearing Wang Wu's complaint, Wang Lu finally stopped the question and answer session, sorted out his thoughts, and then said, "I'm glad you're willing to spend so much time chatting with me." Yanluo smiled. "Then it's time for us to leave." Yanluo's smile quickly cooled down. Wang Lu turned his head and said, "Didn't you tell me when we were chatting just now? This passage can't trap me. I can leave at any time if I want to, so thank you for telling me so many things. Of course, in return, I also told you a lot of things. It just depends on whether you have the ability to return to the immortal world with those secrets. By the way, your ignorance also let me confirm one important thing." Yanluo looked at Wang Lu quietly. "Xiaoyu really doesn't have long to live." Wang Lu said, "He has clearly possessed his daughter, Xia Xiaohe, but he knows nothing about Xia Xiaohe's experience in 9 regions. Didn't he tell you that I have the gate of all realms in my hand?" "The gate of all realms?" Yanluo's face changed slightly. As an immortal, she certainly knew what the gate of all realms meant. Even if it was only a fragment, as long as she could use its power a little, it would not be difficult to return to 9 regions from the endless void. If she knew in advance that Wang Lu had the gate of all realms in his hand, of course, she would not be stupid enough to cut off the passage. So, the possession of Xia Xiaohe may be true, but the limitation of the immortal king's possession is also very obvious. Except for the last moment, the consciousness of the immortal king has not been awakened, so he doesn't even know that I have the gate of all realms. Otherwise, there is no reason for him not to tell you. And this phenomenon, I'm afraid, is because his primordial spirit has decayed? We often say that when a person's life is coming to an end, in addition to the decay of the body, it is also the decay of the primordial spirit or the soul. The immortal king plundered his own blood to prolong the life of the body, but he was unwilling to integrate the consciousness of the later generations so as to dilute himself. Thus, he could only use this method of possession and hibernation to prolong his existence in vain. This is really ugly. When it came to this, Wang Lu ignored that the ruby on Yanluo's forehead had begun to shine with a dangerous light and continued to say, "An old immortal king and an immortal world in peril. In the face of such an opponent, I believe the morale of 9 regions should be unprecedentedly high. Thank you for your cooperation so that I can confirm this good news. Then goodbye." With that, Wang Lu spread out his right hand, and the light in the palm of his hand slowly twisted. The next moment, Yanluo's figure suddenly became ethereal, and a long and vicissitude aura instantly enveloped the whole passage. Wang Lu fiercely clenched his right hand, and that unformed black hole was immediately annihilated. However, a 2 meters long iron spear appeared in his hand. The muzzle of the spear had already gathered a soul-stirring and powerful energy, as if a new sun was shining. At the same time, the woman in white, who was still lazy just now, had already stood in front of Wang Lu on the right side. Her emerald-green bamboo sword was pointed diagonally down and lit up a golden shield in front of Wang Lu. Yanluo's sudden change seemed a bit passive at this time. There was a trace of disbelief on her face, but her hands still did not stop moving. A thick ancient sword was suspended in front of her. One side of the sword was engraved with stars, sun and moon, and the other side was engraved with mountains, rivers and plants. It was the most precious treasure of the immortal world, Shenyuan sword. Xiaoyu, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Chapter 809. With a flash of blazing light, the battle in the passage between the two worlds began. Wang Lu was the main attacker. After being miniaturized, the positron cannon in his hand shot out a turbulent flow of energy. The energy that occupied the positive pole between heaven and earth reacted mysteriously with the space, annihilating everything along the way. However, when this destructive energy flow shone on a heavy sword, it was swallowed up by the sun, moon and stars engraved on the sword, like a stone sinking into the sea. The endless destructive power was annihilated, unable to produce any practical effect. On the other hand, the heavy sword that was projected from infinitely far away could never really stand in this world. The sun, moon, and stars on one side of the sword were constantly gathering and dispersing under the bombardment of the positron cannon, and the star map could not be fixed. On the other side, the grass, trees, and mountains were surging, and the golden light of the ancient sword was flickering. Yanluo frowned and repeatedly pulled it several times, trying to summon more projections from infinitely far away. However, it was disturbed by the continuous energy flow of the positron cannon, and she could not fix the Shenyuan sword. After a while, she decisively waved her hand to disperse the projection of the Shenyuan sword and replaced it with a tiger tally. The moment the tiger tally appeared, Wang Lu's positron cannon stopped. The 2-meter-long iron spear shone with a red high-temperature luster, and then he put it behind his back. His whole body rushed forward like an arrow leaving the bow. The tiger tally was the opponent's trap. It was one of the many tools that Yanluo used to control the servant army. Activating the tiger tally could summon the corresponding servant soldiers. And this tiger tally corresponded to the self-destructing soldiers. Once they were concentrated by the positron cannon, these fanatical servant soldiers, who believed in the immortal king and believed that he would grant them a paradise after reincarnation, would immediately become one of the most dangerous weapons in the world. They would shout that the immortal king was the greatest and then detonate themselves. The power of the explosion was enough to injure an immortal. And a group of self-destructing soldiers would be enough to destroy the passage between the two worlds in an instant, and the 3 people in the passage would also die. Of course, the immortal King Xiaoyu would only lose a chess piece named Yanluo, but the other 2 would lose everything. Yanluo's response was quick and correct, but Wang Lu had predicted her response in advance as if he had foreseen it, so he once again took the initiative. The moment the tiger tally appeared, he closed the distance between them. The ruby in the center of Yanluo's forehead and the 2 gem-like clear eyes reflected Wang Lu's rapidly approaching figure at the same time, and then they were soon covered with a layer of haze. The closer the distance, the more advantageous it was for Wang Lu. As a swordsman, he was best at close combat. Even though all his power came from the giant soldier god, it did not affect his essence. However, Yanluo was not the head-on type. She was better at hiding in the cover of a large legion and driving her subordinates to achieve her intentions. Even if another great consciousness occupied Yanluo's body at this moment, the resources that immortal King Xiaoyu could use were only the part that Yanluo possessed. Yanluo was not good at close combat. Her physical cultivation method and primordial spirit were not suitable for close combat. Even if she awakened the consciousness of the immortal king, it would be difficult to change all this. In the blink of an eye, Xiaoyu had fallen into a disadvantageous position. Of course, this was not because immortal King Xiaoyu's reputation was undeserved and his strength was lacking. It was because Wang Lu had been waiting for Xiaoyu for a long time. As early as before entering the passage between the two worlds, Wang Lu already knew that he and Xiaoyu would have a battle. For most of the immortals in the immortal world, the possession of the immortal King Xiaoyu was a top secret that no one knew. However, Wang Lu had already guessed that Yen Luo might have been possessed before he came, because this unknown leader of the servant army under senior immortal Xiaoyao also had the blood of the immortal king. This secret was revealed to Wang Lu at the last moment of his life by senior immortal Paksu, who forcibly broke through the limit of the immortal world, as a reward for that hardy training. After Wang Lu learned this secret, he immediately began to design against Xiaoyu. The first two steps of this chess game were executed flawlessly by Wang Lu. First, he used the positron cannon to forcibly interfere with the projection of the Xinyuan sword, forcing the immortal king's most powerful weapon to be unable to be used. Then he tried his best to close the distance and drag the battlefield into the field that Wang Lu was best at. When the two of them got closer, the third step began. Absolute domain. Non-phase sword defense. At the same time, the master and disciple took out their most powerful defensive method. A golden polygonal shield and a round non-phase sword defense were supported at the same time, sandwiching Xiaoyu in front of him. Wang Lu's polygonal shield was behind Xiaoyu, while Wang Wu's non-phase sword defense was in front of Xiaoyu. Then Wang Wu strode forward and Wang Lu suddenly stepped back. The two strongest defensive shields moved with their masters, one in front and one behind, and suddenly squeezed toward the middle. Xiaoyu immediately propped up his arms to withstand the pressure from the front and back. Although the target of his possession, Yen Luo, had mediocre strength, Xiaoyu himself was the king of the immortal world, and his use of power was far more brilliant than Yen Luo's. Even when fighting 1 against 2 with brute force, he was not at a disadvantage at all. However, Wang Lu's third step had just begun. Turn. With a command, the absolute domain and non-phase sword defense immediately began to rotate crazily, grinding Xiaoyu's hands like a millstone. Xiaoyu's hands were ground into ashes in a breath of time, and then the forearms, the upper arms, all the way to the vital points such as the chest, abdomen, head and so on. Xiaoyu was completely helpless against this. Both the non-phase sword defense and the absolute domain were all-around defense, which could block any kind of immortal technique. It was difficult for Xiaoyu to break through these two shields in a short time, and it was difficult for him to use the shuttle technique to cross the shield. He could only be caught in the middle and watch himself being forced into a dead end step by this big millstone. Faster. Wang Lu frowned slightly as if this huge advantage still could not satisfy him. The immortal king's consciousness has not been completely resuscitation. He is still in a daze. Once he really resuscitation, Wang Wu curled her lips and said, "It's easy for you to give orders from behind, but have you ever considered the difficulties of me as the executor? 20 million spirit stones. Why didn't you say so earlier? Just wait and see how I'll triple the speed." Wang Wu let out a long laugh, but the laughter came to an abrupt end. Her whole body stiffened, and the light of her non-phase sword defense flickered. If one looked at her with the immortal eyes at this time, one could clearly see that the hundreds of king pill inside Wang Wu's body were dancing chaotically, showing signs of gradually losing control. The beta version of the non-phase method, after all, lacked some stability. After being forced several times, it finally reached its limit. At this time, the gem on Xiaoyu's forehead burst open, and an invisible and colorless but undoubtedly tyrannical force burst out. Wang Wu's non-phase sword defense was instantly penetrated, and her whole body was instantly riddled with holes and flew backward. Wang Lu immediately withdrew his absolute domain and moved forward. He held Wang Wu with his left hand, and the positron cannon in his right hand kept firing at Xiaoyu to distract him. However, Xiaoyu's reaction was very subtle. He neither took advantage of the situation to seriously injure Wang Wu, nor did he dodge Wang Lu's positron cannon. He just rode Yen Luo's body and floated to Wang Lu's side. This journey was not long, but in order to come to Wang Lu, Xiaoyu paid a terrible price. Most of Yen Luo's body was scorched by the positron cannon, and her waist was pierced through, revealing 2 broken spines. The breaking of the gem on her forehead also made her vitality quickly disappear. Obviously, Xiaoyu was going to make a desperate blow. Therefore, Wang Lu also calmed down and focused on the last round of defense. As long as this wave was defended, this battle would be won. However, the expected attack did not come. At the last moment, Xiaoyu lightly stretched out his remaining right hand, came to Wang Lu's waist, and forcibly took out something from the mustard seed bag tied to his belt. A small spinning black hole. The next moment, Xiaoyu closed his right hand hard, and the black hole disappeared without a trace. Return to the original owner. Xiaoyu smiled softly and then fell to the ground powerlessly. Wang Lu's face was gloomy and he didn't say a word. At the last moment, Xiaoyu's goal was not Wang Lu's life, but the gate of all realms in his hand. Because as long as there was no gate of all realms, this passage that separated the two realms would be a dead end. Of course, Wang Lu also knew this, so he had kept the gate of all realms very well. The mustard seed bag was sealed, and the gate of all realms was stamped with his own brand. It was impossible for him to think that Xiaoyu could break through so many layers of defense and hook out the fragment of this primordial treasure with just his fingertips. Perhaps it was indeed because of what he said, return to the original owner. As the original owner of the primordial treasure, Xiaoyu's ability to control these treasures far exceeded expectations. After completing the last blow, Xiaoyu no longer resisted. In fact, he didn't have the ability to continue to resist. Yanlua's physical body was almost destroyed, and it had completely lost its use value. Wang Lu fed Wang Wu an elixir to stabilize her injury while looking at Xiaoyu condescendingly. After a long time, Wang Lu sighed, the magical power of the immortal king is really eye-opening. Even if it is an incomplete body that has just been resuscitated, I still have to do my best. I have calculated tens of thousands of possibilities in advance, but in the end you still succeeded in stealing the peach. Speaking of which, did you take that thing back to the immortal realm? Xiaoyu didn't speak at all, just closed his eyes and waited for death. Perhaps for this immortal king, it was a shame to say one more word to the lower world's bastards. Wang Lu didn't mind. He turned his head and saw that Wang Wu's injury had stabilized, so he put her on the side of the passage. Then he looked at Xiaoyu seriously and asked a question. Do you really think that I will return that thing to you intact? Wang Lu smiled, I have borrowed it for so long, of course I have to show my sincerity. I have deposited a little gift on it. I hope you will like it. Before he finished speaking, Xiaoyu's eyes suddenly opened, but red blood flowed out of them. The next moment, his head went soft and he fell completely silent. It seems that the fragment of the primordial treasure really died a worthy death. As Wang Lu said, the smile on his face gradually disappeared. Next, how should I get out? Chapter 8:10. In 9 regions outside the Heavenly Sage Hall in Xingjing sect in the central region, a crisis that almost caused the two forces to break up was finally eliminated by a bloody massacre. The speculators in the Wuxia League gathered together, but they were almost wiped out. After the nine-tailed fox led the crowd to slaughter most of the people, Supreme Hichu finally arrived late and came forward to maintain the overall situation. The focus of his work was nothing more than to express his sincere apology for the various injustices suffered by the Dixian people before, and then to announce a more comprehensive internal rectification. What was interesting was that Supreme Hichu produced a very detailed rectification plan on the spot, which even had the signatures of the heads of the other major sections. It could be seen that this was a thunderous strike that had been premeditated for a long time, and he wanted to exterminate some forces. It was true that this would cause considerable internal friction, but the accumulated malpractices of the Wuxia League in the past 15 years were also swept away overnight. The relationship between the Wuxia League and the Dixian people became close again, and the dominance of the 5 major sects was further consolidated. Compared with the previous situation where there was a turbulent undercurrent under the centralized power, it was much more advantageous. It was undoubtedly a time to set things right. As the nine-tailed fox wisely chose to retire. She left the Heavenly Sage Hall as soon as possible, ready to go freely. However, she did not go far before she fell into a new predicament. I say, you guys. The task is done, so don't always follow me, okay? I'm not your mother. The fox girl helplessly tried to expel the entourage behind her. You all have your own families, right? For example, you, the dignified lead disciple of Xingjing sect, why don't you accept the kindness of he too? Why are you pestering me? Xianghua, who was named by the fox girl, smiled and said, you transferred us here with the token of Wang Lu. If we don't follow you, who else should we follow? The fox girl angrily said, then I now order you to disband and go back to your own homes. Even if I'm just a fox, I still have a private life. I've been single for thousands of years, can't you give me a chance to leave the group? Xianghua said, the authorization period given to you by Wang Lu has passed. Now you have no right to give us orders. I really don't know what to say. Are you guys playing with me on purpose? You're playing me because I'm a 9-tailed celestial fox, right? Xianghua explained, as the pilot of the experimental machine, we control the most important force in 9 regions. For the sake of safety, obeying orders has been engraved in our primordial spirits, so even if we want to disobey orders, we can't. You ordered us to follow you, so we can only follow you until you give us new orders. Other than Wang Lu, Who else can give you orders? That's all. He's not allowed to have a second voice. When it comes to the use of the experimental machine, Wang Lu only trusts himself. Even Tetragon is not allowed. The nine-tailed celestial fox could not help but scratch her head when she heard that. That guy looks quite smart. How could he make such a low-level mistake? He did not even set up a substitute. Who will replace him if he falls? Xianghua sternly said, if Wang Lu falls, there's no need to consider the issue of succession. Anyone in the 9 states can replace him, but not him. Do you think so highly of your old enemy? Xianghua said, I don't think I'm Wang Lu's old enemy. That's not good for me and Shengjing's sect. The fox girl pouted and said, Humph, that's boring. With that, she no longer paid attention to these stubborn pilots and walked around the heavenly sage hall. The fox girl actually didn't reject this group of experimental machines that insisted on following her. It was true that it would be inconvenient for these experimental machines to follow her, but wasn't it also a kind of protection? As the traitor of the fallen immortal who almost destroyed the Lingjian school and now severely injured Fengyin Taoist master, without the protection of these experimental machines, she would have to be cautious in 9 regions. Halfway there, the fox girl suddenly thought of a problem. Xianghua said that anyone in 9 regions could replace him, but not Wang Lu. But now Wang Lu seemed to have been banished to the endless void and could never come back, right? Thinking of this, the fox girl suddenly had a headache. Although she was forced to betray the immortal world and jump to the side of 9 regions, betrayal was betrayal, and the immortal world would not be lenient to a servant. Now she had no choice. Once the ship of 9 regions sank, she would definitely die. Let me think about it. Is there any way to bring that guy back to 9 regions? At the same time, in the Heavenly Sage Hall, the leaders of the 5 uniques had gathered together. Together with the representatives of the Dixian side, they held an emergency meeting. Although they had just cleaned up the accumulated abuses of 9 regions, the participants all looked sad, and the atmosphere in the Heavenly Sage Hall was also full of depression. The problem that the 9-tailed fox could think of course they could also think of. The loss of Wang Lu in the passage between the 2 worlds was a fatal blow to 9 regions. A small part of this emergency meeting was to discuss the management of the Wanxian League in the future, but more of it was to discuss the countermeasures in the absence of Wang Lu. However, where could there be a good countermeasure? Without Wang Lu, it was impossible for anyone to take his place. This hopeless war seemed to fall into the abyss, and the sea of blood seemed to be close at hand. Thus, although the traces of the massacre in the Heavenly Sage Hall had been cleaned up by the immortal method, a strong smell of blood still lingered at the tip of the nose. In the silence, Supreme Hichu took the lead to speak. Taoist Fengyin, how is your injury? Fengyin Taoist master slightly leaned his body sideways and said, It's not a big deal, thank you for your concern. Is it really not a big deal? I see that you are in low spirits now. It seems that the injury on your primordial spirit has not yet healed. Don't try to be brave at this time. If there's any problem, just say it and we'll solve it together. Supreme Jury, the leader of Kunlun sect, said, The combat power of your Lingjian school's Heavenly Sword Hall is one of the most important parts of the plan. As the leader, every move of yours is of great importance, so you can't act willfully and recklessly. Fengyin softly said, Thank you for your concern. Jury wanted to say more, but was interrupted by Supreme Tianluan with a smile. Sect leader Jury, there's no need to say it. I think sect leader Fengyin is just trapped by love. After a period of time, he will naturally adjust himself, so there's no need to insist on it now. Supreme Jury cast a suspicious look. The leader of 10,000 Arts sect, who was known for his ignorance of worldly affairs and low EQ, also understood what being trapped by love meant? Wasn't his worldly affairs calculation only effective on mortals? The next moment, Supreme Tianluan said to Fengyin, Sect leader Fengyin, you can't let it go. She's just an adopted daughter, and she's even the incarnation of the 9-tailed fox. Why do you take it so seriously? I think you might as well find a Taoist companion as soon as possible and give birth to your own child. At that time, your feelings will naturally be transferred, and you won't be sad about the disappearance of Feng Ling. Fengyin gritted his teeth and said, Thank you for your concern. You're welcome. I happen to know a lot of female cultivators here and their conditions are good. Do you need me to matchmake you? I can give you a free marriage divination. I know that fellow Taoist is proficient in the stellar star divination technique, but that kind of divination is often inaccurate when it comes to yourself. It's better to believe in my marriage divination. If fellow Taoist doesn't have the heart to break the divination with years of virgin power, or because you have no practical experience and have no confidence in this matter, my 10,000 Arts sect also has a unique solution, which can be customized privately. I guarantee that you will be satisfied. Feng Yin couldn't say a word for a long time, and his heart was suffocated with a burst of stuffiness. Okay, enough of the gossip. Supreme Hichu's words finally brought the topic back to the point. Wang Lu is lost in the passage between the two worlds. At present there are 3 things that need to be done. The first is to prevent the fallen immortals from taking this opportunity to open the second passage. For this reason I have asked Tetragon, the head of the Dixian, to guard near the crack in the sky, and shared with them the right to use the 9 regions map, so that she and her men can appear in any corner of 9 regions in a cup of tea's time, which is enough for emergency. The second is to find a way to bring back Wang Lu. At present, I have drawn the team of Xingjing sect that is best at the way of time and space to go to the Blue River region for investigation. I hope that there will be results as soon as possible. Third, we also need to prepare for the worst. Some procedures need to be adjusted as soon as possible. Supreme Hichu was indeed worthy to be the head of the Wanxian League for many years. His 3 points were right on point. No one objected to the first 2 points, and only the details were supplemented. However, the third point was difficult. To prepare for the worst was to continue the tireless struggle against the fallen immortals without Wang Lu. However, as Qianghua said, the significance of Wang Lu was simply irreplaceable. In the past 15 years, many of his business arrangements were only known to him. Other people could not mobilize those resources at all. For example, the Red Sea underwater workshop had to be shut down on the spot. Among them, the Lingjian school suffered the biggest impact. In the past 15 years, Wang Lu had constantly mobilized the resources of the whole continent to pour into the Lingjian school in order to fully exert the infinite potential of the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall. Each of them had inherited the legacy of the Golden Generation. In terms of cultivation talent, they could be regarded as the best in the world. If their potential was fully tapped, they could play the role of a mainstay. However, now that Wang Lu suddenly disappeared, the whole training program came to an abrupt end. More importantly, in the past 15 years, because of Wang Lu's strong style, he was in power, although he might not have enough energy to use this power well. But now that he was gone, who would take over this power? This topic was so sensitive that even Supreme Hichu did not dare to speak rashly. Fighting for power and profit was a taboo within any organization, but it was also an inevitable phenomenon. Wang Lu had left so much power vacuum that someone had to fill it. But now who could easily take over? Even the former number 1 person in 9 regions, Supreme Hichu did not dare to make this guarantee. Fortunately, it didn't take long for the sudden change in the situation to leave them no time to think about this problem. In Heavenly Sage Hall, the node connected to the 9 regions map lit up with red light. That was the highest level of warning sign. Then a cold voice sounded in the hall. The second crack in the sky has appeared. Chapter 8:11. The news of the opening of the second crack in the sky disrupted all the arrangements. In the Heavenly Sage Hall, the third issue raised by Supreme Hichu came to an abrupt end. In the face of the enemy, no one thought about fighting for power and profit. Those who had this idea had just been cleaned up by Nine-Tailed Fox. All their strength would be devoted to crisis response. Supreme Kuchin asked, "What did Tetragon say?" The next moment, Tetragon's voice sounded in the Heavenly Sage Hall. "We are rushing to the Southern Heaven region at full speed and are expected to arrive in 60 breaths. Southern Heaven region? The original estimate was wrong. The second passage was not opened in Blue River region. The other party used the group of immortal tombs as a waymark to force their way in. I'm afraid they did something to us when we retreated from the fallen immortal world 10,000 years ago. I'm sorry we didn't notice it at all." Supreme Hichu said, "No one expected that they would have such a foreshadowing, and they have been patient for so long. I have opened the spiritual vein spring of the great array of 9 regions for you. You will have the authority to control the spiritual vein of 9 regions, and you can use it as much as you want. The Red Guards of Royal Soldier Sect will soon arrive with the Extinguish Immortal Sword. Please be sure to hold on until the Death to Immortal Sword array is launched." Leave it to us. Okay, we're here. The call with Tetragon was cut off. As the leader of the Red Guards, Supreme Kuchin had already left. In recent years, the Red Guards of Royal Soldier Sect was the strongest army in the continent under the support of Wang Lu. More than 100 deity stage cultivators had undergone the most severe military training and turned their immortal cultivation base into naked killing skills, which made them invincible on the battlefield. However, even this tyrannical army could not do much on the battlefield of immortals. There was only one purpose for the establishment of the Red Guards of Royal Soldier Sect, to let their god of war, Supreme Kuchin, exert the power beyond the limit, the power of the extinguish immortal sword. Supreme Tianluan said, "Okay, Kuchin has set off and I have to go back to prepare. We'll take some time to wake up the trap immortal sword. But what about the remaining death to immortal sword?" The ancient immortal weapons, the 4 death to immortal swords, had long been lost. Only the kill immortal sword fell into the hands of the Shengjing sect, which was passed down from generation to generation as the most valuable treasure of the sect. However, after the end of the grand competition, the cultivators found that they could use the magical ability of the group of immortal tombs to restore the other 3 swords using the kill immortal sword as the base. After all, although the 4 immortal exterminating swords were said to have power close to that of Khanate cardinal treasures, they were still man-made in nature. If their predecessors could do it, there was no reason why their descendants couldn't. After 15 years, the extinguished immortal sword was perfectly restored and handed over to the control of the royal soldier sect. The embryo of the trap immortal sword had been completed, which was sent to the 10,000 arts sect to transplant the sword spirit and nurtured until now. Only the head of the 4 swords, Zhu Xian sword, still lacked the finishing touch. No matter what, it was difficult to forge successfully. He had planned to spend 10 to 20 years slowly studying it, but unfortunately time waits for no man. Without Zhu Xian sword, it was difficult for the death to immortal sword array designed on the 9 regions map to exert its full power. This trump card was almost a waste card. The sect leader of Spirit Sword Sect, Feng Yin, who was assigned to master this sword in advance, was silent for a moment and then said, "If you use the stellar diffraction technique, you may be able to extract a bit of the death to immortal sword intent from the void and use it to control the sword, which can have 60 to 70% of the original power." Supreme Jury vetoed, "Your injury is not healed yet, so using the stellar diffraction technique is suicidal. What's more, as the main sword, the death to immortal sword will affect the entire sword array. There's no choice." But, at this time, the representative of Dixian, who had been listening for a long time, interrupted the discussion of the several supremes. It was an unprepossessing middle-aged man, surnamed Dongfang and named Ling. Although he was not good at fighting, he specialized in forging and refining. In the past, he was the chief of armaments of Dixian and had a high prestige. "Leave the death to immortal sword to me, I will restore it as soon as possible." Supreme Qianluan frowned, pinched his fingers and said, "Do you really have a way?" Feng Yin remained silent as if he was lost in thought. Dongfang Lin said, "I won't joke about this kind of thing, but I need half a day to complete the restoration." Supreme Hichu said, "Okay, then I'll leave it to you." With that, Supreme Hichu put his hand into the void and took out a pale sword after a long time. Dongfang Lin took the death to immortal sword embryo, nodded, and then left the heavenly sage hall. His 2 companions looked at his back with complicated eyes and also said goodbye. Can he really do it? Supreme Jury frowned and said, "His refining technique is indeed better than ours, but if he really has a way to restore the death to immortal sword, why didn't he say it earlier?" Feng Yin said softly, "Taoist Jury, do you remember the story of Ganjiang and Wuxia?" Jury's face suddenly stiffened. After a while, he shook his head and sighed, got up and said goodbye. "I'm going to preside over the spiritual vein spring array." After Jury and Qianluan left, there were only 2 people in the heavenly sage hall, Hichu and Feng Yin. Supreme Hichu suddenly sighed and said, "100 years ago, I could never have expected that 9 regions would face a disaster. Now, at the moment of life and death, it's really shameful to reflect on the various actions of Shengjing sect in the past." Feng Yin nodded and said, "Taoist Hichu has said too much. Shengjing sect is the mainstay of the immortal cultivation world of 9 regions. Even if there are many controversies, after all, the merits outweigh the demerits. Without the 9-region strategy that Shengjing sect has carried out for many years, without Taoist Friends' 9 regions map, today's situation would only be a pile of loose sand, which would be even more desperate. Well, I have to go back to the mountain to mobilize the junior brothers and sisters of Heavenly Sword Hall." The entire Heavenly Sword Hall? Taoist friend, don't tell me. Although Lingjian School is an important place in 9 regions, after all, there are not many people. Heavenly Sword Hall is the foundation of the sect, so Taoist friend doesn't have to put all your eggs in one basket. Feng Yin said, "If we lose this battle, neither Lingjian School nor 9 regions will have a future. What's more, our Heavenly Sword Hall has long been ready. The things that we carry are different from the others." He too said, "In that case, I only hope that the next time we meet, you and I can drink a celebratory wine." Feng Yin pondered for a moment. Through the Kunlun mirror he seemed to see the distant future. Definitely. At the same time, in the southern heaven region, above the plentiful city outside the tombs of immortals, an ugly scar tore the sky. From it, a vicious curse that did not belong to this world gushed out. Like a black sludge, it poured down like a waterfall. When Tetragon arrived, the black waterfall was pouring into the plentiful city, turning the vast plentiful city into a black ocean. The cultivators and mortals in the city would be swallowed up the moment they touched the black sludge. Even the residue of their souls would not be left. Since the grand competition, the popularity of plentiful city was not as good as it used to be. However, it still had a resident population of more than 1 million, which made it a bustling big city. However, at this moment, the city had become a dead city, and millions of creatures had been wiped out. In the sludge, millions of corpses rose and fell, flowed with the waves and gradually gathered in one place. Above the mountain of corpses, a looming huge figure was unscrupulously looking down at the city and the earth below. Its posture was full of greed. Seeing such a tragic scene, the Dixian people who followed Tetragon suddenly became angry. Several of them could not hold back their anger and were ready to make their move immediately. However, Tetragon raised his right hand and stopped their recklessness. "Don't worry, this big guy is just..." Before her voice fell, a ghost-like figure appeared less than a foot in front of Tetragon and softly interrupted her. "This big guy is just a stupid undead puppet. You have good eyesight." The man looked like a young man in his early 20s. He was handsome and outstanding, and his posture was as straight as a pine tree. He was a rare handsome man. However, at this moment he suddenly appeared in front of Tetragon without any warning, which made people feel like they had fallen into an ice cave. Only a real immortal could have this kind of speed that was above that of a group of Dixian people. Without hesitation, Tetragon sent out a ray of light head-on, which pierced the man. However, the pierced figure shattered like an illusion, and the fragments fused and reassembled at the side without any damage. The young man smiled and stroked his chin. With a playful look he said, "What a wild temper, but it's very much to my liking. I just don't know if the senior immortal will allow me to catch you as a pet." He hadn't finished speaking when another person flashed out from the crack in the sky and stood by the young man's side. It was a tall and plump woman, and the space between her brows was filled with unbridled charm. It caused one's imagination to run wild just from looking at her, and it caused one's face to flush red. "Sunny Ching, you'd better not have any ideas about her." The young man suddenly frowned. "Rulyuo, are you going to get in my way again? I'm reminding you out of kindness. I know this little one. 16,000 years ago, she had been to the upper realm as a guest." Sunny Ching was stunned. 16,000 years ago? You can't remember? Then let me remind you again. She is Sun Buping's woman. This sentence seemed to have a great magic power. Sunny Ching, who was smiling just now, suddenly had a layer of frost on his face. "So it's that bastard's woman. TSK, a pair of broken shoes. I really misjudged her. Rulyuo, there's nothing for you to do here. I alone am enough." Rulyuo shrugged. "That won't do. The senior immortal sent you and me to the lower realm together. I don't dare to go back like this. Anyway, you're not interested in them anymore. It's better to kill them all together." Sunny Ching said, "Okay, I like to kill broken shoes the most. Leave that woman to me. As for the others, you can do whatever you want. Just don't kill them all." The two talked unscrupulously, completely treating Tetragon and the rest of the Dixian as dead things. However, Tetragon and the others didn't even have the qualification to be angry. In the face of the fallen immortals, any extra emotion would only accelerate their death. This was a painful lesson that was exchanged with the lives of countless people. At this time, the arrogance of Sunny Ching and Rulyuo was actually a good thing in her view. A careless fallen immortal was easier to deal with than a focused fallen immortal. At this time, her lineup was complete. As long as she joined forces with her companions behind her, they could launch a great immortal technique that was enough to kill an immortal. However, just as Tetragon was silently accumulating his power, he suddenly saw a smile on the faces of Sunny Ching and Rulyuo. The next moment, their figures flashed, revealing a horrifying bloody mouth behind them. The half-real and half-illusory behemoth that was entrenched on the mountain of corpses in plentiful city spewed out a deadly curse from its mouth. "Oh no, I've been tricked." Chapter 8:12. The Red Guards have assembled, please give the order. Okay. On the Royal Soldier Sect, Supreme Kuching calmly looked at the army in front of him. The Red Guards was the most powerful army in the Royal Soldier Sect in the past thousands of years. Each of the 108 deity stage cultivators had experienced the mountain of corpses and sea of blood in the royal soldier sect. Wearing the blood-red army armor without the need to form a formation, these more than 100 people could compete with the best in the Dixian sect without falling into a disadvantageous position. And if the core figure of the army, Supreme Kuchin, wielded the Extinguish Immortal sword, it would be enough to contend with the terrifying power of the true immortals of the upper realm. Some people once commented that if this Red Guards appeared during the Second Great War of Immortals and Demons, perhaps this army alone would be enough to end the war. The powerful army that the successive sect leaders of Royal Soldier Sect yearned for was nothing more than this. This was the most powerful army that was created by gathering all the resources in the 9 regions. Even Shengjing sect was far from being able to do such a thing, which could be said to be unprecedented in the past. However, the mood of Supreme Kuchin was even heavier because of this. Because this battle was not only the first battle of the Red Guards, but also their last battle. After this battle, it was likely that there would be no more Red Guards in 9 regions. Neither Supreme Tianluan nor the Feng Yin Taoist master told him about this matter during the divination. However, as a soldier who had been through many battles, Supreme Kuchin had a strong intuition about death. Therefore, at this moment on the platform, Supreme Kuchin had nothing to say. It was the duty of a soldier to die, but it was really a pity to let such an unprecedented army go to the battlefield of death. Leader? The soldier who served as his deputy was a bit confused because he had never seen Supreme Kuchin hesitate. What exactly happened? The next moment, Kuchin suddenly raised his hand and slowly took off his helmet. Below the general naming stage, cries of alarm rose and fell. This disciplined army actually couldn't control themselves, unable to restrain themselves. The true appearance of Supreme Kuchin had been an unsolved mystery for many years. This mysterious leader was always armed with weapons and hid his true face under the heavy armor. People only knew that he was tall and mighty, and that his voice was as deep as a bell, but they didn't know what his facial features were or what his appearance was like. There was once a rumor that Supreme Kuchin had suffered Qigong deviation during his cultivation and accidentally destroyed his appearance. Some people also said that his facial features were melted in a fierce battle. Some people said that he was haunted by resentful spirits because of excessive killing, and he had to have a demon-sealing armor to suppress them. His true appearance was ferocious like a ghost. There were many different opinions, but even the most well-informed people could not tell what the truth was. At this moment, Supreme Kuchin took the initiative to reveal the mystery. And this truth was enough to shock the calmest Red Guards. It was the face of a woman with an elegant and delicate contour. However, her face, which was as white as jade, was covered with hideous scars. Her eyes, which were like limpid autumn waters, did not contain any gentleness. Supreme Kuchin stood on the stage and did not say another word. She was not a talkative person, so she would not explain why she lifted her helmet at this time. Her indifferent gaze swept over them, and it was as cold as the edge of a blade. Every Red Guard soldier who made eye contact with her would involuntarily retract his gaze and then stand upright and meticulous. Not long after, Supreme Kuchin raised her head and held the flag in her hand forward. Let's go. The next moment, the 9 regions map opened the way to the front line of the Southern Heaven region for the Red Guards. A rainbow full of brilliance, but the end of the rainbow was full of darkness and blood. When Kuchin rushed to the front line, she saw a battlefield that was more tragic than expected. There were corpses everywhere, tens of thousands, hundreds of millions of corpses piled up like a mountain. Among them were the residents of Plentiful City, the people born from Gisoris in the City of Immortals, and the innocent creatures from the surrounding areas. Of course, there was also Dixian. 1-2. As far as the eye could see, there were dozens of casualties. The Dixian team led by Tetragon himself only had about 50 people in total. Of course, each of them was a great cultivator at the peak of Mahayana stage, only one step away from breaking through and ascending to immortality. They were veritable immortals on Earth. They were also one of the 4 poles of 9 regions. The so-called 4 poles were the nickname for the 4 strongest forces in 9 regions at present. The Dixian team led by Tetragon, the Red Guards of Royal Soldier Sect, the Red Sea Underwater Workshop, the Zaku Army trained in Area 51 of Blue River region, and the pair of Master and Disciple on Non-Phase Peak. In addition, Supreme Hichu controlled the 9 regions map and gathered the power of the whole continent to provide support for these 4 poles, so that their power could be exerted to the fullest. In theory, with the help of the 9 regions map, any pole had the strength to contend against a senior immortal alone. If they could cooperate with each other, the eruption of power would be even more dazzling. However, at this moment what came into view was the tragic scene where the Dixian team was almost completely annihilated. The food immortal with an endless appetite died. His huge stomach was broken from the middle, and his immortal mansion and internal organs were crushed. His 2 eyes were wide open as if he couldn't believe his own death. The old man Qin Guangmu, who always had a stern look, died. His corpse was torn apart, and his head was thrown around by several shadowy imps. He died with a remaining grievance. Liu, the wine immortal who once drank and chatted merrily with the soldiers of Royal Soldier Sect, died. Although his body was intact, his favorite wine pot, spring water, had a hole in it from which Liu's blood and spirit flowed out. There were too many Dixian people who died in battle, which was too much for the eyes to take in. Supreme Kuchin frowned. Through a glance just now, she had already made a basic judgment. The Dixian people were mostly caught off guard, and the culprit was most likely the translucent spirit hovering over the mountain of corpses. Judging from the dispirited appearance, the Dixian people also made a powerful counterattack before they died. At this time, there were still a few survivors among the Dixian people. Tetragon and the remaining 6 or 7 Dixian people were trapped in a corner, struggling on their deathbed. Fortunately, these people were not separated again. Several people were back to back, and there was a looming spiritual spring in the center. It was the spiritual vein spring given to them by the 9 regions map. Relying on the support of the spiritual vein of 9 regions, they still had breathing space. But death was only a matter of time. Besieging them were 2 immortals, 1 man and 1 woman. Like a cat playing with a mouse, they disintegrated the defensive circle of Tetragon and the others bit by bit. From time to time, they left terrible scars on their bodies or tried to pollute the spiritual spring. What was more fatal was that the collapse of the Dixian team meant that no one could control the scar in the sky. The waterfall-like black curse poured down, and the demons that were born to be born flew and wandered in the air. For a time, countless thoughts poured into Kuchin's mind. What should I do now? Block the passage between the 2 worlds as soon as possible? Or rescue Tetragon and combine the 2? Or take advantage of the weakness of the huge spirit to destroy it, so as to avoid future troubles? In just a trivial moment, Kuchin made a judgment. Kill the man and the woman first and then converge with Tetragon. However, when she held the military flag and took the lead to kill the 2 immortals, she saw Tetragon turn his head slightly with difficulty, and his eyes flickered. There was a trap. Kuchin realized the problem at the first moment. The current situation was probably set up by the fallen immortals in order to induce her thinking, and then induce her to make a wrong judgment in this urgent situation. Rescuing Tetragon seemed to be the most reasonable choice, but there was a huge trap hidden in it. Because the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind, when rescuing Tetragon, her back would be exposed. It's you? Without hesitation, Kuchin pulled out the immortal sword Extinguish Immortal from her waist, turned around with all her strength, and slashed at the ferocious giant undead spirit. At the same time, the giant undead spirit had also torn off its disguise of being dispirited and listless, and opened its huge mouth to spit out a deadly curse. The collision of red and black erupted in the sky of the southern heaven region. The ancient immortal sword Extinguish Immortal danced with red light, extracted the lives of 108 red guards, and burst out with the power to destroy all things. Although the giant undead spirit from the immortal world had the curse to corrode the heaven and earth, under the Extinguish Immortal sword light, it retreated step by step. After a long time, it was cut by the sword light and let out a painful howl. This decisive counterattack of the Extinguish Immortal sword could be called a stroke of genius. Supreme Kuchin's rapid response prevented them from falling into the worst situation. However, after this sword strike, Kuchin's heart was even more shocked. The full blow of the Extinguish Immortal sword was a real world-breaking blow, which was enough to break a small world. Even a senior immortal would find it difficult to withstand it. The giant undead spirit was cut by the sword, but it only howled in pain. It looked slightly dispirited, but it didn't seem to be injured. What kind of vitality was this? Was it because the hundreds of millions of creatures in Dishen's corpse had overnourished it? No, it was too late to think about the principle of its existence. It was better to break 1 finger than to injure 10 fingers. Since they had already fought, it was better to find a way to completely kill it first. Kuchin immediately waved the military flag so that the red guards behind him changed their formation and slightly dispersed, which could not only avoid being seriously injured by the giant undead spirit's counterattack, but also provide stronger support for the Extinguish Immortal sword. Haha, I've been waiting for you for a long time. However, at the moment when Kuchin changed the formation, the handsome immortal in the distance suddenly stretched out his hand and pointed at the Red Guards. A Red Guard soldier had a hole in his forehead, and then fell from the sky without saying a word. This change came so fast that the Red Guards couldn't react, and Supreme Kuchin was also startled. It turned out that the two immortals besieging Tetragon was also an illusion? What kind of calculation was this? No, the situation can't be controlled anymore. Supreme Kuchin immediately realized that if they continued to fight like this, not to mention persisting for half a day until the death to Immortal Sword was completed, they might even throw away the extinguished Immortal Sword in their hands. However, she was already at her wits' end. The Dishin's collapse was too fast. As a result, the support of the Red Guards gave the opponent a chance to break them one by one. At this time, if the Dishin's lineup was complete, they might be able to fight with the combination of the two poles. But now it was too late to say anything. At the same time, the support that 9 Regions map could provide was also very limited. Spiritual Vein Spring, People's Unity. At this time, there were only a few suitable arrays, but none of them could help the front line turn the situation around. The real trump card is not our 2 poles. Wang Lu, where are you? Where is your Zaka Legion? At this moment, thousands of miles north of the Southern Heaven region, a group of young soldiers had reached the limit of their endurance. Zhoumumu's eyes were as red as blood as she roared, "Fox, do you want us to watch them die?" The 9-tailed fox's face was pale and her whole body was trembling. "No, you can't go there. You just have to follow me, you can't go there. If you're afraid of death, just shiver here and wait for the disaster. I absolutely can't sit back and watch. This damn authorization order." The 9-tailed fox's body was still trembling, but her voice had calmed down a bit. "Even if you hate me, I will never allow you to rush to your death at this time. More than enough people have died." As she spoke, the fox's voice became more and more firm. No matter what others thought, she would never let these precious fighting forces be lost in vain. However, at this time she suddenly saw a flash of lightning across the sky thousands of miles away. A sword light that was as clear as the mountain spring and as sharp as the astral wind of the 9th heaven shone dazzlingly. Luli? The only one who was not limited by Wang Lu's authorization order and had left Fox's side early. Chapter 8:13. Luli, you idiot. Are you trying to kill me? Looking at the clear sword light that lit up the sky thousands of miles away, the 9-tailed fox felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave, and her whole body turned cold and soft. Breaking into the battlefield of the fallen immortals with her own strength, in her eyes, Luli was simply a dead person. In that scene, even if Wang Lu came in person, he would have to think about it before he dared to make a move. How could she, an inferior version, dare to go straight in like that? At most, she only had the combat power of a peak supreme. In the face of a true immortal, she was afraid that she couldn't even stand a light breath. And it didn't matter if Luli died, the key was what about her guardian. In any case, the responsibility of lax supervision couldn't be shirked. Wang Lu handed over the 12 test machines to her, not just for her to show off. With the power of these test machines, she had the obligation to protect these test machines. And if Luli, Wang Lu's favorite junior sister, died like this, she couldn't imagine what Wang Lu would do when he came back. The so-called one mistake could cause everlasting regret, which was exactly the mood of the 9-tailed fox at this time. If it weren't for a moment of carelessness to let Luli leave her side, there would be no such big trouble. After a moment of chagrin, the fox quickly cheered up. As a fox demon, the most important thing was to always look forward. Since Luli was bound to die and her guardian would also be implicated, then she might as well consider another way, such as jumping back to the fallen immortal's side. Previously, when she betrayed Paksu and Xia Xiaohe, in theory, it was already a dead end. However, if she could make a great contribution, things were not without discussion. The fallen immortals were not completely unreasonable, and it was still possible to redeem themselves by meritorious deeds. In the impression of the fox girl, there was once a servant soldier from the lower realm who made great achievements in the war in another world. Thus, he was chosen by senior immortal Xiaoyao and pardoned. If she could make the same contribution, perhaps there would be room for negotiation. As for the way to make a contribution, looking at the brighter and brighter sword light thousands of miles away, the fox girl naturally thought of a sentence. Since you have done it once, you might as well do it 15 times. Since he had already killed Luli, he might as well kill this group of people behind him. Just as he thought of this, Fairy Qianghua suddenly shook her head and sighed. She then took out a long sword from the sword sheath hanging at her waist. The fox was somewhat vigilant. Could it be that the dark thoughts in his heart had been discovered? So Hua was ready to eliminate the rebels? Don't do it, I'm a fox demon known for being cunning and black-bellied. It would be too embarrassing if I was seen through just as I had some bad thoughts. However, in the next moment, Hua stretched out her finger and flicked the fire sword, causing the spiritual treasure-grade sword to explode into a ball of boiling fire. Amidst the flames, Lu Li powerlessly fell out. Thousands of miles away, a fiery cloud soared into the sky and dyed the clouds. However, it was quickly swallowed up by the pitch-black sky. This Hua actually swapped the position of the fire sword with Lu Li from thousands of miles away, timely saving her life. Hua's face was also very ugly. What are you thinking? If it weren't for the safety valve set up by Wang Lu here, you would have died just now, do you know that? When we were training in Area 51, didn't they teach you how to judge the situation? Lu Li's whole body collapsed and her voice trembled slightly. I heard the voice of senior brother. What? Hua incredulously raised her voice. Are you sure? Zhou Mumu stepped forward, grabbed Lu Li's shoulder and eagerly asked. The nine-tailed fox was even more shocked. Really? Is Wang Lu really still alive? Lu Li was almost unable to speak, but she still nodded with difficulty. I can hear his voice as long as I can cut open the space. With that, the girl suddenly vomited a mouthful of blood and fell unconscious. Countless large and small scars appeared on her body, which was extremely tragic. Just now, Hua pulled her back from the dead with her sword exchange technique, but how could it be easy to snatch someone from the hands of the fallen immortals? Although Lu Li only appeared on the battlefield for a moment, she was still injured by the fallen immortals and almost died. The fox girl's heart, which had just settled down, immediately tensed up again. What, are you going to be okay? Zhou Mumu stretched out her hand and pressed it on Lu Li's full chest, and a force that was close to a mortal spirit slowly poured in. It doesn't matter, she won't die. The fire in her body is still burning, so her life will recover very quickly. But she won't wake up for at least 3 to 5 days, and it's impossible for her to fight in a short time. Lu Li was a member of the Zaku army with extremely strong individual strength. Losing her combat power was no doubt a loss, but now it was not important. She just said that she could hear the voice of Wang Lu, is that true? The several pilots looked at each other in dismay, and no one could tell the reason. I'm afraid it's true. In the end, it was Zhan Zai, the lead disciple of 10,000 Arts sect, who said his judgment, brilliant sword heart is a very magical talent. Generally speaking, we think that it is only used to improve the attack ability of the sword cultivator. However, there are actually many other ways to develop brilliant sword heart, such as 2 hearts interlinked. She and Wang Lu have been in love for so many years, so perhaps they can really cross the barrier of time and space. Of course, this ability is not without limit. If Wang Lu has really been completely lost in the endless void, it is tantamount to no longer exist. And now, it seems that he should be not far from 9 regions. I'm afraid that Lu Li just found the closest place to Wang Lu along the track in her heart. Hua pondered and said, so that's why she just risked her life to cut open the sky? She wants to break the barrier of space and save Wang Lu? Well, if Wang Lu can come back at this time, all the crises can be solved, or at least there will be a turning point. But, however, if they wanted to cut open the sky in the area controlled by the fallen immortal to bring back Wang Lu, what should they do? When everyone was at a loss, someone suddenly exclaimed. The situation of the Red Guards is not good. On the battlefield thousands of miles away there was a new change. In the passage between the 2 worlds, the third fallen immortal slowly descended. It was a giant with a height of more than 30 meters. His upper body was naked, revealing solid muscle lines. His whole body exuded a fearsome fluctuation of immortal spirit. Sunny Cheng Royuo, you two are too slow. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao is angry. Sunny Cheng said with a smile, why are you in such a hurry? This 9 regions is almost the last world that has not been purified. If you act too hastily now, you won't be able to play later. The giant frowned and said, do you want to disobey the order of Senior Immortal Xiaoyao? TSK Taiwan, you really can't communicate at all. Okay, let's speed up. You can go back and report to Senior Immortal. Humph, you two are the most slippery. I think it's safer for me to do it myself. With that, the giant turned to the direction of the Red Guards and showed a ferocious smile. The next moment he stepped on the air, and the invisible air suddenly shook out countless fine shock waves, which overlapped like a solid wall. With the help of the rebound force of the wall, the giant rushed over like lightning. As the leader and vanguard of the Red Guards, Supreme Kuchin was the first to bear the brunt. In the face of the immortal's surprise attack, she was not in a hurry. She waved the flag and led the whole army to dodge to the side. In the battle of the immortal level, Qiuan's technique of stepping on the air and rushing in the air seemed quite backward. It seemed powerful, but its speed was actually not fast. With the strength of Supreme Kuchin, it was easy for her to react in time. However, the next moment, Kuchin suddenly felt that the flag in her hand was extremely heavy, and her waving was extremely sluggish. As a result, the Red Guards were also greatly affected. Tisk, Kuchin didn't bother to think about what magical ability the other party used. She just waved the Extinguish Immortal sword again, trying to force the other party back with the sword chi that could destroy everything. However, Taiyuan didn't retreat even half a step. Instead, his speed became faster. The next moment, his body collided with the sword chi. A white mark suddenly appeared on his bronze-colored, flawless body, while the sword chi of the Extinguish Immortal sword collapsed and dispersed under the impact. Supreme Kuchin immediately realized that the other party's attack itself was a great immortal technique. It seemed clumsy and crude, but it contained a magical ability that made people unable to struggle. Once it was locked on, there was no way to avoid it, so the God of War flag also became heavy. Once the attack was launched, it was unstoppable, so even the Extinguish Immortal sword could not stop him. Next, it seemed that there was nothing that could stop the arrival of the collision. In the vast battlefield of the fallen immortals, the distance between the two sides was still very far. However, Supreme Kuchin was helpless. She had no doubt that once they were hit by Taiyuan head-on, the entire Red Guards would be destroyed. However, in this desperate situation there was hope again. Green Cliff Mountain, go! Along with a familiar shout, the reinforcements finally arrived at the battlefield. Suddenly there was a mountain in front of Taiyuan, a dangerously tall mountain. This change was so sudden that Taiyuan couldn't stop his momentum and directly hit the mountain. The mountain collapsed in an instant, and every piece of rock was shattered into sand like powder. The towering mountain turned into nothingness. However, with this slight pause, Kuchin finally seized the opportunity to take the Red Guards away from the other party's lock. Taiyuan didn't get angry but smiled instead. He immediately put down the Red Guards and looked up to look for the uninvited guest who intervened. As a result, he only saw a mountain falling from the sky and pressing down. 5-element mountain, go! It was still that awe-inspiring shout. This time, Taiyuan was no longer careless. He punched through the air. The fist pressure broke through the air, formed a white wave and continued to extend the force forward. Suddenly, a milky white dragon with a length of several miles appeared in the air. The dragon head collided with the mountain and the 5-element mountain buzzed. Although it did not break, it was shaken away from Taiyuan's position. Flame mountain, go! Before the 5 elements mountain landed on the ground, another burning red mountain flew over. Hushueshan, go! Rift Valley mountain, go! Chitianshan, go! This time, Taiyuan finally couldn't laugh. Unknowingly, he was surrounded by countless mountains. These mountains were like elite tigers and wolves, eyeing him covetously. Supreme Tianluan was holding the Trap Immortal sword and looking at him disdainfully above the clouds. 10,000 Laws Heavenly Wheel, with the 9 regions great array, move the mountains and fill the seas, experience the power of the immortals. He strode forward, enduring the pressure of thousands of mountains. The entire mountain-moving and sea-filling formation seemed to be faintly shaking. However, Supreme Tianluan on the cloud just sneered. Lei Mingshan, go! A mountain that did not have a real body but was made of thunder elements approached quietly under the cover of the other mountains. Then it revealed itself abruptly and charged at Taiyuan. Roaring, it poured into Taiyuan's back as fast as lightning. The giant's entire body trembled, and he let out a howl of anger and pain. Every pore on his body was spewing out electricity, and the smell of burning flesh filled the air. Sunny Cheng Ruyuo, why aren't you two coming to help me? Outside the mountain-moving and sea-filling formation, Sunny Cheng and Ruyuo looked at each other, and then Sunny Cheng said, Senior Taiyuan, didn't you say you want to deal with them yourself? We see that you're having a good time now, so how can we disturb you? You two bastards. Ah! At the same time, Sunny Cheng and Ruyuo saw a trace of shock and even fear in each other's eyes. Are you kidding me? This formation is so evil that even you, a barbarian, are trapped in it. Even if the two of us go in and help, what can we do? Die together with you? We came to the lower realm to have fun, not to seek death. You two, do you think that if I die you will have a good end? Royuo was startled when she heard this. She slightly stopped her immortal method and turned to look at Sun Yicheng. Sun Yicheng smiled but instead intensified the pressure on Tetragon, and then said, "If he doesn't die, the two of us will be unlucky. Senior Taiyuan has always been very vengeful. So, instead of being tired, it's better to concentrate on taking down this broken shoe and her accomplices. In this way, even if Senior Immortal Xiaoyao blames us, we still have something to say. If we let these people go to support Taiyuan now, even if they can really save him, do you think he will say good things about us in front of Senior Immortal?" Royuo nodded and said, "That's true. But if that's the case, we might as well let them go a little. Otherwise, if we accidentally kill all these bastards, there will be no reason not to make a move." "Aha, you're really thoughtful. In that case, why don't we just put on a show and get a little injured?" The voices of these two people were not loud, but everyone on the battlefield could hear them. The Nine Regions side was naturally somewhat surprised and uncertain. Taiyuan was completely angry and uncontrollable. "You two, when I get out, I will cut you into pieces." However, before his voice fell, a red light fell from the sky and pierced his shoulder. Then, from the shoulder down, the whole right hand quickly turned red, and then turned into a mass of blood. After a moment, the mass of blood suddenly swelled and burst open. It was as if there were thousands of blood waterfalls pouring down from the sky, causing a large red sea in the southern heaven region. Ah 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 ah. Taiyuan's wail scattered the cumulus clouds within hundreds of miles in the southern heaven region. The pain contained in it surged far away, causing many creatures within hundreds of miles to die on the spot. The wail of an immortal seriously injured had this kind of power to slaughter all living beings. The strength of the red light that destroyed the entire right hand of the immortal could be imagined. In the great array of moving the mountains and filling the seas, Supreme Kuchin raised the extinguished immortal sword high. The sword was stained with the blood of the immortal, showing a strange color. The red guards that followed her had disappeared, but there were hundreds of killing marks on the flag on her left hand. Taking advantage of the time Supreme Tianluan bought for her, she finally combined the magical ability of the red guards and the extinguished immortal sword, turning it into the invincible technique of extinction, which destroyed one of the immortal's arms. "Hey, are we really going to stand by and watch? That big guy is dead, shouldn't they be aiming at us?" Royuo asked Sun Yicheng in a panic. "Don't be silly. With that kind of formation we'll only die faster if we go up. It's better to find a way to take this broken shoe as a hostage to delay time." "But, it doesn't matter. Believe in Senior Immortal Xiaoyao. He shouldn't have sent us to die." When it came to Xiaoyao, Royuo's expression became a bit complicated. She was both respectful and fearful of the Senior Immortal who was under one person and above 10,000 people. Sun Yicheng was right. He would never let his men die in vain. But on the other hand, just now the two of them thought, but now there was really no other choice. Royuo licked her lips, turned to Tetragon, and a seductive smile appeared on her face again. "Little cutie, do you want to give up resistance and be my hostage?" "Don't even think about it." Tetragon's delicate face had been stained with blood gushing out of her 7 orifices, but her stubborn eyes did not waver in the slightest. "Go to hell, all of you." As soon as her voice fell, Tetragon burst into a loud cry, and the remaining Dixian behind her also shouted at the same time. The sound waves swept and surged, bursting with incredible power. The faces of the two immortals, Sun Yicheng and Royuo, changed at the same time. Because under the sound waves, they felt their bodies soften, and their immortal spirit collapsed. Inconceivably, they had the idea of surrendering. Let the immortals surrender? What the hell were these bastards doing? When they rushed into the upper realm with great momentum, they didn't seem to be so domineering. Could it be that after more than 10,000 years they had become stronger? Unfortunately, it was too late to think about the answer now. Good. Well done. Thousands of miles away, Nine-Tailed Fox and the others, who were hiding in a safe place to watch the whole process, were delighted by the change in the battle situation. Zhoumumu was particularly excited. Previously, she thought that the battle situation was hopeless. Who knew that after Supreme Tianluan arrived, he easily reversed the situation. In her excitement, the girl didn't have time to wipe the tears from the corner of her eyes. She laughed and slammed Zhan Zai on the shoulder, which made the latter shake. He almost thought that she was occupied by the fallen immortals and attacked her own people. "Your 10,000 art sect has really done a good job. I'm really sorry for saying that you guys are useless weaklings." Who's the useless weakling? The several pilots next to them looked at the two lead disciples with some amusement, and their hearts were also gratified. It seemed that the immortals were not so omnipotent and invincible. At this time, what appeared on the battlefield were only two branches of the Death to Immortal Sword array. The Kill Immortal Sword and the Death to Immortal Sword had not yet appeared, but the three immortals were already suppressed to the point that they couldn't breathe. And if the Death to Immortal Sword array was completed, perhaps even if that senior immortal Xiaoyao came, he would also die on the spot. So, even if there's no Wang Lu, it doesn't seem to matter, right? Yes, compared with the great array of 9 regions, the master and disciple pair of non-phase is actually not that great. Even if Wang Lu himself is present, I'm afraid he can't do what Supreme Tianluan did. Several people whispered a few words, but suddenly someone found that something was wrong. In this team, the most important people did not show any joy at all. Qionghua's face was heavy and her eyebrows were slightly wrinkled. Zhu Shiyao's eyes were focused and meticulous, while the nine-tailed fox's body was stiff and her face was pale. What's wrong with these people? Isn't the situation now a big advantage? Why, idiot, are you so complacent after suppressing a few pawns? The fox girl's voice trembled slightly as she said, the passage between the two worlds is still open. The next moment, as if in response to the fox girl's words, the crack in the sky suddenly surged violently. The exit of the passage was torn by some huge force and suddenly swelled countless times. It was as if it was going to swallow the sky. Then a patch of pitch-black darkness slowly descended from the tunnel. It was like a mountain because the darkness had a fixed shape, and from time to time earth and stones fell from the sky. It was like a cloud because the darkness was so vast that no mountain could compare to it. The next moment, the darkness suddenly accelerated its descent. In just a moment, it completely rushed down the passage and no one could react. The darkness finally showed its true appearance. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.